call the January 7th, 2020 Planning Board meeting to order. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board, and the first item is to introduce the other members of the board. Down at the end of the table to the extreme right, Brad Harriman, who is the representative to the Planning Board from the Board of Selectmen. Next to Brad, Peter Goodwin, then John Thurston and Mike Cotter. To my left, Vaughn Dugan and Susan Replier, and Matt Sullivan, our planning director, is sitting at the other end of the table. The first three items are public hearings, and let me just quickly go through the process. I'll read the item into the record. The applicant then needs to present the application to the planning board members. If we have questions, we'll ask them at that time. Then we have to determine if there are any waivers needed. If there are, we need to vote on granting the waivers. Then we need to determine if the application is complete. If it is, we'll make a motion to accept it as complete and open the public hearing. If anyone is here to talk to this, a particular item, that would be the time for you to make your comments. After we've heard all of the comments, I'll close the public hearing, and planning board members will determine if we approve or do not approve the application. So, the first application, Timothy and Mary Kellogg. This is a public hearing for a subdivision, boundary line adjustment to create 3 lots from 2 existing lots. This is at 56 and 60 Pleasant Street. So the applicant, if you'll give us your name, and you know the drill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the board. My name is Brian Berlind. I'm a land surveyor and president of a company called Land Tech out of Ospey, New Hampshire. With me tonight is Tim Kellogg, the landowner and applicant. I guess I'll, Matt, would you like these certificate of monumentation now or just in one fell swoop?
Sure, I'm happy to take that now.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian. Great, thank you.
So I also gave Matt a computation of the form factor for the worst lot, which is lot 2, shown on the plan. It is the narrowest and has the same length as the others, and it had a form factor of 25.8, whereas the zoning has a cutoff of 35. So the worst lot meets form factor very well. The others will do even better. The Kellogg's own 2 pieces of land. It's 217-176 and map 217-177. Both lots are developed with nice homes, and the old line is this dash line dividing the 2 lots. They wish to subdivide the 2 lots into 3 lots. The middle lot would be undeveloped. So tax map 217-177, what we're calling lot 1, will be a developed lot containing 33,650 square feet and 114 feet of road front. That would be this lot right here where the Kellogg's live. Has existing dwelling unit there. This lot has a second dwelling unit right there. Its driveway is here. The middle lot will be minimum size per zoning, which is 21,780 square feet, and 75 feet of road front. This will be lot 2, the middle lot, also the lot that the form factor was computed for. This plan, because at the time of survey, had an accessory structure on lot 2, but that has since been moved to lot 1, which will be shown on the final Mylar to be produced probably tomorrow. And lastly, Lot 3 is developed with a home. It will have 34,526 square feet and 110.59 feet of road front. That means this lot here is a very nice home, existing pool in the back. These are all older, I'll say, above average homes on a nice yard. There's very few trees, but what trees are there are, some are shown, but it's mostly open land. That lot at tax map 217-176 is consumed by this application. So for lot numbering purposes, we're sticking with lot 177. Both lots are serviced by both municipal sewer and water. DES subdivision approval is therefore not applicable. The lots are in the village residential zone, which is a zone designed to be densely developed, hence the very small lot size of 21,780 square feet and 75 feet of width. The site slopes from the road towards the rear, so all water is going away from the road on this lot. We have had the site examined for wetlands by a certified wetland scientist, and none were found. And we're requesting two waivers. A waiver to Regulation 174-7, uppercase D5, which is soils tests, and a waiver to 174-7D6, which is also soils tests, perks, rates, and source of soils. Soils tests are extremely important when a lot needs septic disposal, but these lots have municipal sewer, and I believe that soil testing in this case would produce no usable information. And that's about it.
Okay, questions? And the structure from the new lot has been removed?
It has.
Okay.
And we'll locate that by survey tomorrow, assuming conditional approval.
Okay. Matt, any?
Very limited additional comment. Obviously, as the applicant has noted, this is subject to two waiver requests from the board, the applicant providing a waiver request form with justification within your packet. Obviously, the issue of outstanding standardized lot shape has been addressed by the applicant as well, and these are generally rectangular lots, so I did not anticipate that that would be an issue. And one final note that I did want to make is that obviously the existing lot does have a dwelling unit, an additional dwelling unit on it. Even with the creation of this lot of 33,000 square feet in size, the lot is adequate for both a single-family dwelling unit and an additional dwelling unit under the village residential lot standard requirements. So I believe this proposal is compliant with all of the subdivision regulations, and subject to the waivers, I see no issues.
Okay, so you're saying that the second dwelling unit actually complies?
It complies with the minimum lot size required for that additional dwelling unit. Obviously, that's
Not the setback, but that's
correct.
A pre-existing structure.
Correct.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, all right, questions?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, on the Technical Review Committee sign-off sheet, Dave Ford does not recommend. He's concerned about drainage and neighborhood. Can you address those issues? Do you remember exactly what came up during TRC that would cause our head of the Department of Public Works to be concerned about drainage on this site?
Mike, I'm not sure that I can. I wish David expanded upon that a bit more. Obviously, the Public Works Director is concerned about drainage, I think, on any subdivision of land. I think that's a note that he frequently makes, although I'm not sure that his note is commonly a not recommend. I can't remember the specifics, but if the board feels that's a substantial issue, I could certainly ask for additional information if it feels uncomfortable approving the subdivision.
On your own notes on your Technical Review Committee, you have a note here, note need impervious something?
Calcs. One of the questions that I had is that after the adjustment, I wanted to make sure that all the lots were compliant with the maximum allowed impervious coverage on the 3 lots. They are, in fact, compliant. That information was provided as part of the application, but when we had initially reviewed it, I wanted to particularly address the existing lot number 217-177, what's shown as 001. I was concerned about that particular lot, and it is compliant.
Good. Mr. Ford's concerns have something to do with the steep slope, which is at the back of that lot?
It could certainly be that. Generally, Mr. Ford has been concerned about subdivisions in any area that's within close proximity to the waterfront, this being certainly one of those areas. So again, I can't remember the exact concerns that he had, Mike, but I really hesitate to expand.
Can't either. He says no recommendation.
He didn't recommending us approval, but he
Right.
was not recommending approval because he wasn't totally sure about the existing drainage that's in place there, which is a combination of surface and subsurface drainage in some areas.
Yeah, right. Brian, do you remember anything about his comment?
I'll address coverage first, if that's okay, but right here in the plan is the coverage of the two lots. Proposed one, which is this lot, has coverage of 25.4, where 30 is the maximum. And the other developed lot, being lot 3, has coverage of 19.8%, where again, 30 is the maximum. At the TRC hearing, I remember Dave using the words death by the cut of 1,000 knives or something like that, where every new home, every new impervious surface contributes to a downstream problem. This will cause a new home, but I also argue that it's in the village residential zone, which is designed to be a densely populated zone. So there's kind of a little bit of conflict in death of 1,000 knives and densely populated zoning districts.
Yeah, I have no argument with that argument at all. My concern is only the nature of the request for waivers. Do the waivers have anything to do with Mr. Ford's concerns?
I mean, certainly the soil typology does have an impact on what the drainage patterns will be on the lot. With that said, I'm not sure that even with the proper soils information provided, that there'd be any determination that this board could make that the subdivision would not be valid as a result, particularly because I don't think drainage is necessarily a consideration within this particular application. I think if you had the ability to request a full drainage analysis for the subdivision, that might be a different situation, but I would argue that's not the case here.
I think that would be overkill in this case. Do you feel confident that the waivers can be granted as requested?
I do feel confident that they can be, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other?
Yeah, Brian, can I ask you a couple questions? Could you describe the lay of the land from the curb cut at the road down south? What happens there? What happens with the grade?
Grade steadily falls downhill to the southwest of this.
What's on the surface of the ground down there?
This is just grass.
Okay, so it's an absorbent area. I think maybe one of the things that Dave Ford might be worried about is when you do the curb cut, then it would channel water down that area. I mean, maybe you want to make sure that you don't draw in water and just pass the water that's going down the road.
And Dave Ford does do the reviewing for the driveway permits. So when this lot, if it's approved this evening, does receive a driveway permit or applies for one, Dave will be the reviewer, and hopefully that exact issue of drainage at the driveway cut could be addressed by him.
Thank you.
This is also a C slope, it's not a D or a E, just to give you an idea of the steep.
Okay, I think the applicant has justified the granting of the two waivers, so I'd entertain a motion to grant the two requested waivers.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, with the granting of the waivers, the application is now considered complete. So, again, a motion to accept the application is complete.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, if anyone is here to speak this particular application at 56 and 60 Pleasant Street, I'm going to open the public hearing, and so now would be time for you to make any comments.
Ann Blodgett, Pleasant Street. I had planned not to say anything until I heard drainage come up. Historically, Pleasant Street drainage is a huge issue. Number of wet basements on that side of the street. Water running down to Sewell Road into a couple particular properties through Varney's land and so forth. So it may not appear that there's drainage on that lot, but it goes downhill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment about that?
Sure, yes.
They did find a big water leak up behind Varney's that was contributing to much of the water runoff that was going down to Varney's and the first house on Sewell Road.
The property we're in always has a wet basement. The property closer to the Kellogg's property has been flooded consistently and was on the market for a long time because it was never mitigated, and mold and all that. So there have been a number of neighborhood get-togethers over many years about who's causing the water, and so this will be a contributing factor for sure, especially on that side of the street.
Okay.
My name's Stuart Robertson. I live on 61 Pleasant Street. My concern is the effect that this subdivision will have on my property's value. Every property north of Oak Street has more than 100 feet of frontage. And south of Oak Street, there are only 4 houses that have less than 100 feet of frontage. 2 of them have more than 90, and 2 of them have more than 80. So this is a very small lot compared to every other lot on the street. So I just, my concern is for the value of my property if this subdivision should go through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It does comply with the village residential zoning standards. Okay, anyone else? Matt, did you have some conditions for us to consider?
If the board considers conditional approval this evening, I would recommend a total of 7 conditions. I'd like to add an additional one based on the discussion. Condition 1 is the incorporation of the plan set, and that being the plan number 1, the 3-lot subdivision plan included within your packets as dated to this evening's approval. 2 will be the submission of a Mylar plan for recording at the Carroll County Registry of Deeds with payment of all recording fees as condition number 3, and those are paid by the applicant. Condition 4 is incorporation of all the documentation submitted within the application package as part of the approval for this evening's case. Condition 5 is the submission of simply updated plans to include original stamps and signatures from a licensed land surveyor and certified wetland scientist. I already have the certificate of monumentation that I just received this evening, so I'd remove that from condition 5. Condition 6, the applicant shall add a note to the final recorded plan indicating the approved subdivision waivers granted by the board this evening. And condition 7, just the final plans shall reflect the removal of the accessory structure as completed by the applicant prior to this evening's hearing. Conditions 1 through 7.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Planning board members, what is your feelings about this application?
We could move to approve, Madam Chairman.
Okay, are you going to make a motion to?
Sure, I'll be happy to make a motion to approve application number, case number 2019-01, tax map 217-177/217-176, with the 7 conditions as noted by the planner.
Okay, thank you. Motion has been made. Somebody want to second the motion? The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. And you're all set. Next application, tax map 217-176 and 177, case 2020-01, Virginia Taylor. This is a public hearing for a 2-lot subdivision at 44 Stoddard Road, tax map 104-8. Hang on, wait a minute. There's some confusion in the notice here. This is tax map 104.
Yeah, apologies for that.
-8.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. 44 Stoddard Road. tax map 104-8, case 2020-02. Okay, applicant.
The applicant is me again. For the record, I'm Brian Berlind, land surveyor. In this case, we're working for Virginia Taylor, who's also in the audience this evening. And Mrs. Taylor owns a farm at 44 Stoddard Road, known as tax map 104 lot 8. She wishes to subdivide the one lot into two. It is her hope and plan to sell the farm on the remaining land and create a new lot where she can build a new home and spend the rest of her years there. Both lots proposed are greater than 5 acres, so DES approval again is not applicable. The lots are in the residential agricultural zone. The zone has a front setback of 30 feet, side setback of 25, and rear setback of 25. Minimum lot size is 217,800 square feet, which is 5 acres, and the minimum road front is 400. This land is also located in the historic district. She would like to divide the one lot into two. The first lot, what I call, it's actually lot 2, what I'm calling to, is exactly 500 acres and has 618 feet of road front on the Bickford Road.
5 acres. 5 acres? 500. 500. Sorry, Ryan, just wanted to make sure.
We would have been later, that was 5 acres, sorry. This will have a new home, take a driveway. We've shown a potential well location here. We did soils test, both perk test and test hole there, so a 4,000 square foot septic area. These are all the things we would show on a septic application to DES, but again, we don't need it in this case. The remaining land has almost 2,500 feet of road front down the Bickford Road, all the way up to Stoddard Road, and a 9.575 acres. Her home is here, and she has a couple of barns and outbuildings and a pasture area for horses I've seen out there, goats, sheep, and chickens. Do you have any cows? You had a horse over. There were some cows, okay. The site has been evaluated by a certified wetland scientist, and the wetlands are mapped as shown here on. Again, we're requesting waivers here. The first waiver is for soils again, but only on remaining land. Her home is here. There's an obvious septic system here. And 9.5 acres to build a new septic system when and if she ever needs to. The new lot does have soils testing on it. Five acres being the smallest lot in the subdivision is way oversized per the Wolfeboro soil sizing standard based on soil type, and that size was close to 1.5 acres necessary, whereas 5 is proposed. And that would be covered by presentation here. And here is the certificate of monumentation, because those monuments are in also.
And you're exempt from the form factor.
Yes, because the lots, both are greater than 300 feet of frontage, form factor is not applicable.
Okay, questions? Hey, Matt, anything?
No additional comments, obviously, again, subject to waiver requests. I did just want to note quickly that Bickford Road is a scenic road. I obviously noted that within my review. No implications directly when it comes to this subdivision, but in the event that the town has to do work out here for any reason, it could be something that plays a role. And I also just wanted to note that although it's not a natural resource impact per se, there is an existing cemetery shown on the plan. Any excavation would be restricted within a certain proximity of that cemetery, but based on what's proposed, I do not anticipate that that would be an issue in the near future.
And people do have access to the cemetery?
Correct, there's an easement to the cemetery.
Yes.
A deed easement to the cemetery. Kind of hard to know exactly where it is. The deed shows here the new driveways and homes, that will not impact any wetland because of the size of the lots.
Okay. Okay, the three waivers, the applicant has given us some justification for granting the three waivers. Somebody be willing to make a motion to grant the waivers? Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, with the granting of the waivers, the application is considered complete. Again, motion has been made to accept the application as complete and seconded. And seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing for this two-lot subdivision at 44 Stoddard Road. Anyone has any comments on this application, please come on up. Okay, all right, okay. Matt, do you have some conditions for us to consider?
I do. I apologize for reading these again, much like the last case, but I have 6 recommended conditions for this case. Condition number 1, incorporation of the plans. 2 subdivision plans included here, one being the soils plan as submitted by the applicant, and the other being the base subdivision plan, both dated to the date of this approval. Condition 2, submission of the Mylar plan to the registry. Condition 3, responsible for the payment of all recording fees associated with both the Mylar and the notice of decision. Condition 4, incorporation of all the documentation in the application package. Condition 5, being responsible for submission of final plans, including original stamps and signatures. Again, recognizing certificate of monumentation has been received. And then finally, the 3 waivers granted by the board shall be added to the final plan set as notes for recording.
Okay, all right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Planning board members, how do you want to proceed with this application?
Be happy to move to approve, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Motion has been made and seconded.
You want a proper motion?
Why don't you do that?
Please.
Okay, I'd be happy to move to approve case number 2019-02, tax map 104-8, with the 6 conditions suggested by the...
Okay, and seconded. All right, okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Okay, great, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, moving right along here. The third item for a public hearing, John Rourke, M&A Living Trust, and Thomas R. and Cheryl D. Perry. This is for a public hearing for a minor lot line adjustment. Tax map 188-1-12 and 13. Case 2020-03. This is at 185 Ambrose Way. And lot, a vacant lot.
Randy Tatro, Norway Plains, for the applicants. This is a minor lot line adjustment with an equal land swap of just over 5,000 square feet. The parcel's located on Ambrose Drive and Ridgeview Estates, which is a existing subdivision that's just north of Forest Road, connects from 109 over to Hemlock Street. And this shows the existing property lines, existing lots, and the 2 5,000 square foot areas are going to be swapped between the parcels. We did a form factor calculation on this. We also did looked at the original lot size by soil type, and we recalculated this difference in there, and it actually went up slightly. So they both meet the 1 acre lot size by soil type. I don't know if those were submitted with the original package, but I thought so. If not, I can enter them into the record, and anybody can take a look at those.
I believe that you did. Yeah, okay.
Other than that, it's existing subdivision was created, I want to say in 03, 04. It currently is a private road that services the lots. Second sheet shows the topography, conditions. It also shows the existing building envelope that I know the plan board likes to see. These are the resulting building envelopes in blue once the lot line adjustments take place. So that's based on the lineal building setbacks and on one of the lots, the current wetland setback. So that shows you the building envelopes in blue. Other than that, I'll just entertain any questions from the board.
Okay, and no waivers.
No waivers are requested because we meet the requirements and we've shown all the other checklist items. We didn't monument the lots ahead of time because I felt that might be a little presumptuous.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Randy, can you explain how the existing house was placed practically on top of that lot line? And maybe advise us on how to remedy that problem.
Well, that was fully discussed at the TRC. Without getting into the details of that, I did bring a copy of the septic design for the property that was approved, where the building permit was granted. Wolfeboro does not have a foundation certification setback at the building permit stage. So anybody that comes in with a septic design with a proposed home location, and it gets altered at all during construction, it gets moved, or someone decides to do it in a different area, there's no check on that versus the setback requirements or anything like there is in other communities. There's been a discussion on that, Vaughn, that's, it's a financial burden but this is more of a financial burden, but it's self-serving for me to say so. To answer your question, someone submits a septic design. Septic designers are not always surveyors like myself or Brian, and sometimes it's septic design. So the boundary lines are normally shown as approximate, and there's a note decertifying to that effect. So the building inspector, based on that, or a sketch from the owner, not a surveyed document, grants a building permit. Contractor goes out there, septic installer, measures off some things, builds a foundation. Decides he doesn't like where that is, he moves it over or whatever. There's no check on that. This is not a rare case. This just happens to be one that we've done the work on and we caught it in the interim. This could have went on for a long period of time and got found 5, 10 years from now, to be quite honest with you. So as far as a suggestion on that, there's no other way to tell other than check it at the foundation stage, or the footing stage would even be better. Because then, obviously, at the footing stage, you can make some adjustments and you don't have, a lot of money invested. So in this case, luckily, both owners can agree to change the line, and it still meets the regulations. There has been cases, however, that I've dealt with where it does not. And so that's when it becomes even, more problematic. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
And your comment on the TRC sheet regarding policy, survey policy.
I think it's something that should be seriously considered. Quite frankly, we do in some cases require a foundation certification. Typically that's on shorefront lot development. It is not as common for us to do that on landlocked lots, if you will, or those that are not as tightly built. This is an excellent case where we rely on the septic design if the homeowner does not submit a fully surveyed plan, and if there is an issue that's realized, and just to be clear, there is a check in the sense that, the building inspector goes out there, looks at the foundation, but unless it's realized at that point in time, this remedy may not be an option for the homeowner down the road. And as Randy has said, it may be realized a year from now, it may be realized when the property is transferred, it may be realized in 50 years when the property changes hands for some reason. I think it's something we should talk about, at least for new dwelling unit construction. I don't think it impacts this application this evening, but I think it will be wise to consider a foundation certification requirement for certain types of development.
In this case, the owners are lucky because it's the same owner and they can do a land swap and make everything even. If that weren't the case, they might wind up in the ZBA looking for an equitable waiver of dimension or something of that sort.
Exactly. If this case wasn't quite as drastic as this one, and it was a couple of feet or something like that, because this didn't go over the property line, but it came close to the property line. So that's the exact reason they created the equitable waiver, for honest misplacement.
Yep.
The septic design doesn't show the house in this location. It shows the house up here, meeting the setback, because we knew how to meet the setback. That's not always the case. It just got moved to that location.
I really think, I mean, it is an administrative thing, probably, but I certainly think that we should put something in place. So is that something that you would bring back to us?
I think it's something that we should discuss as a board after this application. I agree that it's a policy that the department could create without board approval, but I think it would be wise to have your input as to requiring either for all construction or requiring for only certain types of construction. I'd be curious what the board thinks of that
Right,
as we get to a later time.
okay.
So Randy, this is a septic and not the house?
Excuse me?
That's a septic that's over the line?
No, it's just the dwelling that doesn't meet the setback. The septic system is on the lot in the same location as it was designed.
The septic
Problem
plan
is-
is typically the only layout that a homeowner has of where the proposed house is going to be. They typically don't have a survey.
So what will have
I
to
understand,
happen?
but I don't know why we're deflecting and calling it the septic system is out of place when really the foundation was put in the wrong spot.
No, we're not
I-
saying the
I-
septic is
I
out
agree.
of place. We're just saying that the septic system design that was submitted showed the house in a certain location. The only way anybody knows that that was built in that location on the ground, John, is if they check it. And in this case, it wasn't built in the same place as the septic design showed it. Septic system itself is fine. It's in the spot it's supposed to be in. When the septic system gets approved for installation, they'll have to draw an amended plan showing the house in the proper location. But the septic field and the tank is still in the same location they were designed in.
So clerical error, yeah. Do we not go out and have Corey measure from the lot?
We absolutely do not recommend that staff measure anything on the ground because that increases our liability. And that's why I think we should have potentially a policy to require a surveyor to do it because they're qualified to do it. I think this is a substantial issue. I think it's one that for years has been, for many, many, many years has been a problem. And I think we see the results almost daily. And I think if we've got a chance to rectify the issue, now might be a good time to do it. Again, in certain development cases. I think there are additions or other things that wouldn't require it, but for a new dwelling unit being built, I think it's something the board should consider.
Why don't we add this on the 2020 worksheet as something to discuss?
Happy to do that.
Anything else?
Yep, it's our next meeting to deal with that work program. Okay, other questions, comments? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to accept this application as complete.
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, any member of the public want to comment on this application on Ambrose Way? Okay, Matt, did you have some conditions for us to consider?
Do 5 recommended conditions, incorporation of the plans as presented this evening, including the boundary line adjustment plan and the topographic boundary line adjustment plan, both amended to this date. 2, the recording of the Mylar at the Carroll County Registry of Deeds. 3, the applicant is responsible for the payment of all recording fees. Condition 4, incorporation of all the documentation in the application package. And lastly, the applicant is responsible for submission of a certificate of monumentation and updated plans, including original stamps and signatures of a licensed land surveyor, certified wetland scientist, and I would take out licensed septic designer here. that's condition 1 through 5.
Okay, thank you, and I'll close the public hearing on this item and entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman, I'd be happy to move to approve case number 2019-03, tax map 188-001-013/188-001/012, with the 5 conditions as enumerated by the planner.
Okay, thank you.
Seconded.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, and then we will have a further discussion about this issue at our next meeting. Okay, on to the zoning amendment public hearings. The first one is the petition warrant article that was submitted, and planning board needs to hold a public hearing on this and then make a recommendation. But we can make no changes to this particular warrant article. So this is to remove the absolute restriction on drive-through restaurants and permitting their construction and operation on lots consisting of at least 1 acre, and corresponding modifications to the definition of restaurant carryout within the section 175-175, which is the definition of terms in the zoning ordinance. Is someone here to present this petition warrant article? Just a sec. Okay.
I just want to know, I spoke to the petitioner,
Yes, okay.
and they did not indicate they'd be able to attend tonight's hearing, and did have one request for the board, if the board feels inclined, to just provide some justification in either direction on how, if you vote in favor of endorsing the warrant article or recommending it, providing some justification to the petitioner in either direction, depending upon your action this evening.
Okay, well, this is going to be on the warrant.
No matter what.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And actually, it's pretty much the same warrant article that we reviewed a couple of years ago. We also talked about the issue, I think, going back to quite a few years, and determined at that time that we really needed a more thoughtful study of the issue. We were concerned about traffic generation and stacking, and really the impact on the downtown area, because this is proposed only in the central business district. Further, most recently, we agreed to put this on our study program, our work program for 2020, and the whole board agreed to that, and at least it would give us an opportunity to give some thoughtful study to the issue. But nevertheless, this is here, and we'll have the public hearing. But I just wanted to make those comments. So why don't I go ahead and open the public hearing. If any member of the public wants to speak to this issue, okay. Come on up. Tell us your name.
Suzanne Ryan, Wolfeboro. Can someone clarify as to where these 1 acre lots might be?
There are about 12 1-acre lots that meet the suggested petition language. And quite honestly, they're in various locations in the central business district. They aren't really concentrated in one area. But to give a few examples of some of these properties, the Corinthian Yacht Club, the Endicott condos, Bayside condos, the Wolfeboro Marketplace, Wolfeboro Inn, and a few properties owned by Paul Zimmerman as well. And there are about 6 others. But those are just a few examples of the parcels that would meet these criteria.
Suzanne, there are 12 parcels in CBD C1, which are 1 acre or larger in size.
And where is
12
that?
in the district that they're requesting permission to have drive-through restaurants go into. Central Business District, I beg your pardon.
Okay, that helps
Okay.
clarify. It's the central business
Correct.
district.
There are 12 lots there which qualify as 1 acre or larger in size. All right? And of those 12, only 4 do not have currently functioning, recognized, doing well businesses. The other 8 are Wolfeboro Corinthian, Endicott Condos, Wolfeboro Inn, Wolfeboro Marketplace, the old Hampshire Pewter Building, Bayside Condos, the IGA, whatever. And then what's remaining are the bank building and Silva Holding. The bank building on the corner, and then 3 properties down in the marketplace area.
And the second question is, how does the master plan address this, if at all?
Does not address it in any way.
Right.
The master plan does not address drive-through restaurants specifically in any way.
Was there a discussion amongst the,
Not
that you can recall?
as part of any committee that I participated in.
Right. Yeah, I was on the Economic Development Committee, and I don't remember any discussion or on future land use. I don't remember us discussing it.
It was not
Maybe-
discussed.
How did we miss that issue?
How did we miss that one?
Well, we didn't really need to worry about that, I suppose, because we've heard from the town already. When this was on the ballot in the 2017 warrant, the vote was 636 against and 271 in favor. So it was a 1 to 3 in opposition? And what we're being presented with here tonight is exactly the same wording that was knocked down in 2017. So since we were working on the master plan after that date, we've had an adjudicated warrant article when the town has voted, no, we don't want this issue. So we don't really need to address it in the master plan.
Has the Economic Development Commission weighed in on this, or have they had any previous comment on this?
They were made aware of the public hearing, particularly the prior public hearing. I can't recall whether in 2017 they weighed in on the issue, Suzanne. But they certainly, there was no direct feedback for this petition this year.
And they were aware of this.
They were aware of the, it was listed on the prior amendment.
According to the minutes of the public hearing on this issue in 2016, December 20, the EDC did not send a representative to address the issue either for or against.
That's regrettable.
Well,
Thank you.
Okay,
That helped to draw out some information. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on this petition? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Planning board members, what are your thoughts? We need to, well, generally...
On this
we
petition
commented-
style, comment and then a motion.
Yes.
Obviously, you don't need to move this to the warrant. It will be going to the warrant regardless, but a vote either to not recommend or recommend would be.
Right, well, I had technical concerns with the petition, so I'm not really, I thought our first course of action of saying that we would study it would be a much better approach. We really need to address the stacking issues, and that is not addressed at all in this proposal. We really need a specific definition for restaurants, drive-through, if we were to proceed, and this petition warrant article really doesn't address those issues, so.
Madam Chairman, I don't see how the board can recommend this on the warrant, since we did not recommend it on the 2017 warrant, and the towns voted overwhelmingly to oppose the issue raised here. As far as justifications requested by the petitioner, I just draw his attention to the minutes of the December 20, 2016 public hearing on this issue, as well as the minutes of tonight's issue, where he can get all the information he needs regarding the board's feelings about how they behave, how they decide to act on this issue, I would recommend that we do not recommend this petition warrant article.
Is that a motion?
I'd be happy to make a motion that this board do not recommend petition warrant article to allow, to amend Chapter 175, Part 1, Article 27, to remove the absolute restriction on drive-through restaurants, et cetera. Do I need to read the rest of it?
I think that's acceptable.
Period.
And I'd like to second with comment, I'm concerned about the current restaurants and the establishment of really good dining in Wolfeboro and respecting the current owners and business operations here. There are a number of carry-out restaurants, and they seem to be functioning fine without a drive-through. So I would also second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Any other comments? Then all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so then that will be...
Abstention.
One abstention.
I'm sorry, John. So that will be, go on the warrant as an unfavorable.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
All right. Okay, moving along, the next item is a new item that was brought to our attention by our town council, and this is an amendment 175-1 through 175-215 to remove all references to percent coverage within zoning district setback requirements, height requirements, coverage sections, and replace with percentage maximum allowable lot coverage. This amendment maintains all existing percentage requirements for allowable coverage. In other words, it doesn't change the coverage, it just changed some wording. But why don't you just go through
Sure,
a little explanation?
It's very simple, actually. Council was reviewing an additional warrant article that we'll have before us this evening and recognized an issue within our ordinance, and that issue was that we indicate within our dimensional standards for each of the districts a percent coverage. The problem with it being written that way, and that's impervious coverage on the lot, the problem with it being written that way is that it didn't indicate whether that was a maximum or a minimum allowed coverage. And to be clear, we have an administrative procedure of that being a maximum coverage standard. I think it's clearly treated that way by the agents and the property owners that we work with, but council recommended that we clean this language up a little bit so that it wouldn't be challenged at any point in the future, and therefore recommended that we remove all references to percent coverage and replace with this percentage maximum allowed coverage. So this amendment is very broad in the sense that it will amend all of the dimensional standards within the setback requirement, height requirement, and coverage portions of the ordinance within all of the zoning districts to that language that I've presented this evening. And hopefully that makes some sense.
So my only question is why is the word impervious not in that?
That's a good question, and I actually got that question today, and I wish I had some more time to address it. But I believe that the board could make that amendment this evening, and it's not a substantial change if it chooses to. I think it probably should be in there, Vaughn, for clarity. I would argue that coverage is included in the definition for impervious surfaces, and that covers it. But if the board would like, I think it's appropriate to make an amendment to simply add maximum allowable impervious lot coverage to the suggested amendment this evening.
And you think that's okay for us to do that as an added?
Absolutely. I don't think that's something that requires an additional public hearing or notice. That is a non-substantial change, particularly because I think it's already quite clear in the ordinance.
Are you worried at all that council is going to yell at you for doing this?
I'm aware that council will not yell at me, and I'll get to why I think that's not the case a little bit later.
A little bit later.
No, so council's advice, I'm joking, but council's advice has been that if it's a substantial change, it would require additional notice and hearing. If I, in my opinion, feel
That's not my issue is in adding the word impervious in there. Is that going to upset council?
No.
She did not originally intend it.
No, in fact, this language is actually my recommended language. So, and council signed off on this language. So no, it would not upset, there's no pride of authorship with what was written.
I'm not worried about pride of authorship, I'm worried about gotchas later on down the line.
I don't think it is an issue.
Okay, so our specific amended wording would be?
It would be percentage maximum allowable impervious lot coverage.
Maximum.
Doesn't this just sort of make it more obvious to anybody who's reading the regulation that this is what you're talking about, and they then understand?
I personally have to explain this all the time.
Yeah, I think it's one that maybe if you're familiar with it, you get it. But if you're looking at the ordinance for the first time, which a lot of property owners are, I think the more we can simplify it, the better. I was actually kind of resistant to making this change initially, but I think it's because I've known how to interpret this for too long. I think it's a good change.
Okay, so with that explanation and suggested amendment, I'll open the public hearing on this item.
Okay, Suzanne Ryan. This one caught me off guard. You, Matt, are referencing all zones, and yet that says residential R district.
Yeah, Suzanne, that's just intended to be an example of in a district, how would it actually change within the requirements? So I just intended that as an example. In fact, it would change in all of the zoning districts.
What's it going to say on the ballot?
It will say exactly what was in the public notice language, but it clearly says in all zoning districts.
Right.
Okay.
I didn't intend to list them all, I guess, if that's...
Well, no, it looks like it's a residential district. And so you were saying all districts, and if it is, that's your call, but it needs to be understood in the voting booth that that's what people are voting on in their district. It's going to affect the whole town.
Okay.
It's actually not a change, it's just a clarification.
Suzanne, I think the notice language is clear, but I'm happy to revisit that. I think that the notice language is accurate for what we're talking about tonight. But
could you tell me what the notice says?
Yep, the notice says to remove all references to percent coverage within zoning district setback requirements, height requirements, and coverage sections.
I think it should say all zoning districts. And that's not a major textual change.
No,
And
I think
would-
it's just a noticing.
I would go along that by adding impervious, given the late hour, would not be a major textual change, and it is allowed. But then my question is, how does this affect the telecommunication ordinance, which has percentages?
It doesn't affect the telecommunication ordinance because the telecommunications ordinance is intended to be based on either a percentage of structural expansion, either horizontally or vertically. So I don't think there's a relationship there, with the exception of the fact that if you had a very small lot, you would be subject to the impervious coverage restrictions with a personal wireless facility. But I don't think there's any relationship beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so how do you feel about putting in all zoning districts?
Into the notice language, which I think is administrative.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
That would appear on the warrant,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Okay, is everybody okay with that?
What we're looking at here on this agenda is not the actual wording that we're going to see on the warrant, or is it?
It is not the warrant language, and that's traditionally how we've done it. We do a final warrant language
You're going to compose
write
that?
up. Yes, I do traditionally.
Okay,
Whatever makes it clearer.
anyone else want to comment on this? All right, then I'll close the public hearing on this item and go to the planning board. We're going to need a motion to add in all zoning districts and to change the percent coverage to the wording suggested by Vaughn.
So moved on both changes.
Okay, so the motion would be to remove all references in all zoning districts to,
Are we looking at the warrant language, Madam
I'm
Chairman? I thought we weren't.
I'm looking at something that we have to vote on here, that's on the agenda.
Okay.
And then add maximum allowable impervious lot coverage.
So moved.
And those are the two amendments to the, excuse me, John?
Seconded.
Okay, so a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, but, so those are the amendments, and now we need to make a motion to recommend the amendment as presented and move it to the town warrant.
Correct.
So moved.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. Very good. On to the next one. Okay, now the next several items are the ones that we continued from December 17th, so I'm just going to make a reference. I'm not going to read the whole thing into the record. It's already been, that's already been done. And we continued these hearings. Mainly it was a weather-related thing. We were concerned that people that wanted to come couldn't. And so that's why we're here. And so the first one is the signs, the placement of signs, and this is the business directional sign issue. This one, I want to point out to everybody that we have not been issuing, we had a section in the ordinance to allow these business directional signs. Then several years ago, it was determined that no permits were issued. We've had a committee. The committee has worked hard and long, but it became a complicated issue, and we're trying to get something back on the books in the zoning ordinance so that we can have some business directional signs. So if everybody would just kind of get into the spirit of that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get something back that will benefit the businesses. So anyway, let me just, this is, as I said, the business directional sign ordinance changes, and I think many of you have picked up the changes already. So,
Madam Chair, I just want to recuse myself from this one.
All right. Thank you, Brad. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. Matt, you don't need to say anything on this. Matt's not going to go through his presentation unless someone really wants him to go through a specific.
I'm happy to do that if any member of the public wants me to walk through each of the details. In this case particularly, the agenda that was distributed for tonight's meeting that is over there, if you look at the notice language for this general provisions, signs, placement of signs, that is really a bulleted list of all of the recommended changes within this section of the ordinance. I'm happy to run through sort of the justification for why we came up with these recommended changes, but when it comes to the changes that are actually being mechanically made, they're laid out pretty well there. And just to make one other comment, I think not only was the hearing continued on this and other issues due to weather, but I think the board did recognize the need for some additional public input, based on some of the comments that were made. But with that, be happy to hear public comment.
Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing on this item. So why don't you come on up and give us your comments and your name.
Yeah, Troy Lucas. I'm the owner with my wife here of Lucas Roasting Company in the Back Bay Business District. Matt and board, like to say thank you, first of all, because we know that there has been extensive effort put in and that there is effort going forward trying to look at this issue and look at businesses like ours who have recently come to town and have applied and been denied for the sign. And with that, I'd like to say that after last meeting, there were a number of us that from around town, not just in the Back Bay Business District, but from around town, with different streets being involved in wayfinding signs. They got together on the 2nd of January at Wolfeboro Community Food Co-op, and we met, and we did meet extensively. We looked at the proposed ordinance and discussed certain things that were important to us. I have in my hand right here something that was emailed to Matt earlier today, but in regards to it being emailed to him this afternoon and having not been in your hands, he definitely didn't feel like putting it up on the screen this evening. So I do have a copy of that for your review, if I can.
Okay. Great.
I don't, which I'm embarrassed about. Yeah, and I just want to comment on Mr. Lucas's remarks. He's absolutely right. I was asked to share this in advance of the meeting tonight, but I didn't feel that was appropriate based on the fact the planning board had already gotten a packet. But I'm glad that they've brought a copy for each member of the board. But I just wanted to explain that piece of it.
So there were probably, I would guess, about 14 of us who ended up meeting at the Wolfeboro Community Co-op. So an extensive number of people who do have interest in the signs as they would direct people to off Main Street businesses. And we actually, our business is located at 7 King Street. For those of you who are familiar with Bay Street, we are located directly behind Needham Electric. Our business is Lucas Roasting Company, so we roast coffee on site, and we have a small cafe where people come in and out of that to get their coffee, get their bags of coffee. And I did put up a social media video. I actually did a video yesterday, which I posted to, I did not send you the link.
I saw the video.
I saw the video, okay.
I did see the video.
For those of you who went through our application for our business location, you know where it's at. And so I did a video, and I didn't ask that be shown tonight, but from the road where Bay Street is and where King Street intersects it, our sign, which is almost to the allowable limit, we didn't go quite to the maximum size for our sign for our business. It can be seen from the road. However, you need to be looking directly at that sign in order to know where our business is. If you don't know where our business is located and you're just driving down Bay Street and not really paying attention and you see Lucas Roasting Company sign, you might never have any idea what that actually is in back behind Needham Electric. So, with that said, we're probably the most applicable business to what we're talking about in the way of wayfinding signs to direct people to our door. And the reason I say that is we are hidden. We're a retail business that is essentially hidden. I know of some other businesses that are down behind the laundromat. I don't know, are any of them retail businesses, walk-in retail businesses? Okay, so there might be, and I'm not sure what road that is, but Grove Street. So as far as retail business goes, we want people coming through our door. We want people finding our business. If we were just roasting coffee and doing things wholesale, it wouldn't matter so much. But as we look at the proposed ordinance, we feel there has been a lot of work done on this. For sure, there has been a lot of work done on it. In my particular case, in our business particular case, I would direct you to the red letters in number 5, where we would be looking at more than the 2 proposed maximum signs, because the 2 proposed maximum signs for us right now we feel would be 2 signs leading in from Main Street, one on each side, north and south. And then the other would be at Bay and Varney, Bay and Varney, Mill Street, where that all intersects right there, pointing down towards where we're at. we're still looking at the aspect of, as the video stated, 26 Bay Street is actually the address for the bigger building in front of ours, and that is Needham Electric and the Lakes Region Laser, whatever that new business is there. So our business is actually at 7 King Street, which makes it difficult to know where a sign for our business, besides what's out front, would be placed directing anybody to us. We might be the only one in that position, but there were numerous businesses represented at that meeting who felt definitely that more than 2 signs might be applicable to their business. So as it's been passed around, and as everybody can see, we put on this proposed ordinance maybe some suggested changes in red. So last meeting was the first time I had seen the proposed ordinance, and this is where we have gone from the initial proposed ordinance. I'll let anybody else speak to.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Corinne Ferguson, and I'm the president of the Wolfeboro Food Co-op. As such, I'm representing 407 member owners of the food co-op that live around this area. I think, as I understand it, our town is heavily dependent on seasonal and lakefront owners and summer visitors. They contribute significantly to the town's bottom line, as we all know, and they contribute significantly to all the businesses here in this area. And apart from the natural beauty that draw them, that's the lake and the wonderful hills and mountains, they come here because we have a really attractive array of merchants, and those merchants offer a variety of wonderful products. Now, to date, wayfinding signs have helped them find their way to established treasures that are not on Main Street, such as the Wolf Trap. But new businesses will not be permitted, and have not been permitted, to have signs. The Wolfeboro Food Co-op, as I said, is owned by 407 individual members who have supported the development of a store that stocks products of high quality and are made or largely made or grown locally. Like Lucas Coffee and the boat museum that's coming, Wolfeboro Food Co-op is an important addition to the offering that the town gives to both our year-round residents and to summer visitors. Sadly, we and other Back Bay businesses remain invisible to both year-round residents and summer visitors unless they happen to drive past or walk slowly past. Being able to have sufficient signage, and by that I mean not 2 single-sided signs which would look so ugly because you need 2, they need to be back-to-back. Every sign you see hanging is back-to-back, so you don't see an ugly back of a sign. We need, I think, at least 2 double-sided signs each. I would argue we need 3. So I would, these would significantly add to the success of our community enterprise. And these signs, they're widely used in New England, and they're considered to add incredible charm to the area. So the current plan to phase them out, which is what would happen because new businesses replacing older businesses would not be allowed to have a sign according to this ordinance, means that there would end up no signs, and the charm of our town would significantly change. We're supposed to be the jewel of Winnipesaukee. Let's just try to keep it that way. There aren't many of us in Back Bay, so there would be plenty of room for us all to have a sign should we want one. I don't think anybody's asked us if we would actually like a sign. I don't think every business would want a sign. We would love a sign. We'd love 3 double-backed signs. But anyway, thank you very much for your time. I know this is hard, but I really appreciate your listening to us.
Okay, thank you.
I would just note quickly that I'm not sure if the board will respond to this, but many of the recommendations that are in here, this is not a comment on whether I support or do not, but they would require another public hearing just because they're substantial in nature. So if the board chooses to take action on any of these proposed amendments this evening, we would want to continue the public hearing to the night of January 21st. Again, if the board chooses to take action on any of these suggested amendments this evening.
Okay.
Hi, Jerome Holden from Grove Street. I wonder if it's okay with the board if Matt is allowed to put this up on the big screen? Is it okay?
I actually don't have it on this computer, Jerome.
Didn't we already go through this? Yeah, we've already gone through this.
Okay, so you're all set, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, so in the first part of the changes in this proposal, I'm not sure, is anyone here from the Pine Hill Road Development District? Is anybody here from there?
Jerome, if you'd like to address your comments to the board as
Okay.
opposed to the audience?
All right. My concern is that these changes do not include the Pine Hill Road Development District. And I think that it's a bad thing to leave them out, and they would require four double-sided signs on two different intersections in certain places up in that district. Basically, it's the other end of Filter Bed Road. Sooner or later, that's going to get developed, and there was a business directional sign there at one time. It's not down, it's been taken down since. So that's why I added that, and that is the number 3, changing the number 3. Off-premise business directional signs is permitted on approved permitted town-owned posts. Needs to be in all of those districts, not just to add that district. And then there's also a problem with the signs that we have on Center Street, because they're all in the state right away and they're state permitted. So I'd like to add that in number 3. So it says off-premise business directional signs are permitted on approved town-owned posts or on pre-existing non-conforming posts at intersections in existence as of 4/1/2019, and that they can be up in number 1. The change also allows this as or in state right-of-way with a state sign permit. The sign out here in front of this proposed and is an approved location by the committee for this street out here. Was supposed to go on the island somewhere in front of the town hall. Needs to be on the far end. I don't know if there's anyone here from Union Street. If there isn't, then you can, if no one's here to testify about it, then I guess they aren't interested in that much to worry about that. I recommend that the next 3 approved places that you have in your, that the committee approved for these signposts do actually be wayfinding signs that are 1-inch letters or less, because otherwise I think you're going to confuse the driving public as to where they're going to be. And 2 of them are near parking lots, so no one's going to be driving by anyway. And one is at the end of the track path. And if I put JC signs over there, turn right, people will be driving down the track path. So it wouldn't be a good place for that. In number 5, business directional signs shall be limited to a maximum of 2 within the town per business. I recommend adding 4 in the business, if a business is located in the Bay Street Limited Business District or the Pine Hill Road Development District. That way, it takes care of only, everyone else, like my business, only needs 2 single-sided signs, but in the Bay Street District, they definitely need 4 single-sided signs to put on 2 posts at 2 different intersections, and some of them need 6, but they can get an exception. And then for the number of signs on page 2, I'd like to see that 12, and that the height of the post be 12 feet, mainly because it will give a few more people a chance to have signs in the Back Bay area. But on the post at the end of my street, it sometimes had 11 signs on it, and there's a lot of units in that building at 6 Grove Street that change in and out all the time. and it would be better if we had 12 signs there. And in the very last B section of 7, I want to take out that line that says at such time the signs may not be reestablished for new business. Strike that line, mostly because the way this is written, there will be no new signs for no new business. No businesses allowed if this goes into effect. Only the people that had signs before will have signs that are going to do them any good for their business. And I don't really want these signs to become extinct. I realize that the codes don't really allow for off-premise signages, and it's not a nice thing for to codes, but it's really needed for the businesses in Wolfeboro. Okay, so in order for that to work, to have that all at such time the signs may not be reestablished for new businesses, there's 3 things that need to change in this ordinance besides taking that line out. And that was in number 3, where I added the red lettering so that you can have a sign on a pre-existing non-conforming post at an intersection where it's been for years, or has been there since before 4/1/2019. This would enable all the businesses in the Bay Street Limited Business District to put signs on the post in front of Roger Kent's property, which can't be put in the town right-of-way because the town right-of-way is already taken up by the sidewalk and there's a stop sign there. I talked to the bank. They weren't interested in letting it be across the street on their corner. I'm not sure that there's room in the town right-of-way there. And I do have a question.
Okay, let's stick to the ordinance, okay?
This is all about the ordinance.
Well,
This is all about sign placement and taking away our right to have signs in places that were already there. What I want to know is if a property owner, if this goes through, if a property owner that's abuts the town right-of-way says, I don't want those signs even in your right-of-way in front of my property, what are you going to do if you can put one in? Because it's possible you could say that's the only place it can be, so the bank has to let it be there. There's another spot on the other end of Bay Street that could possibly be a new signpost. I know there's a salon there that needs a new sign, a directional sign there, and that would be a good place for the boat museum to put a sign. And there's space there, but what is going to happen if you just stick that in the right of way? I know you put a stop sign up and no one says anything, or a road sign.
okay, those are issues that are going to, if this passes, that will have to be worked out as far as the implementation. And that really is, I'm trying to deal with the changes to the ordinance right now.
Okay. All right, so those 3 changes needed to be made in this, the way it's written, so that new people could have new signs on those posts. My main concern is the post at the end of Grove Street, because of all the businesses that change in and out all the time in that 6 Grove Street building. So I need to have that work, and it would be great if at least those 3 posts could be town approved somehow, so that people could get new signs on those posts. Other than that, I think that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. So hypothetically, have you taken a post in the Back Bay District and maxed out the post with signs that you're going to be able to give to everybody? Has that been accomplished?
No, you're asking what signs could be on which posts, or?
I'm asking you, you're asking for more signs in different locations, from 2 to 4. I'm asking you, have you taken those posts where you can get 2? Have you figuratively laid them all out and said, okay, well, I know that this is all filled, so I actually know I need 4? Have you done that?
Somewhat. The post on Roger Kent's property has 7 pairs of signs on it right now. There could be 12 the way this is, so that's an additional 5 businesses, which would take care of the people that I've been talking to in the Back Bay area for right now. The next place that people would have to turn.
We're trying to provide something for all business owners, not just certain people's customers. So, I mean, that was the purpose for all of, when the committee met, was to make sure that all business owners would have an opportunity.
Yeah,
Be on
I
the
appreciate
sign.
that. There isn't all 800, isn't it 800 business owners in town are not interested in these signs? Only probably 100, 125 maybe.
Okay, well, that could
So-
be, but I'm just telling you what the committee's approach was.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why to expand it to 12 and 12 feet, so we'd have a little bit more space to put more signs. Okay. Any other
Jerome,
questions?
did you bring these concerns to the wayfinding sign subcommittee?
As much as I was allowed to talk, yes.
You did, so they've
Yes.
heard these concerns?
I think most of them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other comments?
My name's Roger Murray, and I was a member of the committee. I think our goal in what we were doing, our work, was to try and come up with an ordinance that was workable and that would fairly address the Wolfeboro business community. And I actually think we succeeded. I'm really somewhat surprised to find that there's some people who think we were trying to phase out wayfinding signs. I mean, I wouldn't have gone to all those meetings if we were trying to phase them out. I mean, we worked very hard to try and come up with a way that would make it possible for as many people as possible who wanted them to get those signs. And if you look at, we did come up with a list of wayfinding signs currently in the town, and we came up with 48, and of those, 18 were permitted. So under this ordinance, 3 existing signs, which may or may not be in compliance, will be allowed to exist and continue in place. It doesn't make sense to adopt an ordinance and then say, well, don't worry about it, you can all violate it and have signs that don't conform. Ideally, what we're trying to do is come up with a way where people can get signs that do comply. There's nothing here that limits where a post can be placed other than it has to be at an intersection. It can't be a traffic hazard and it can't be a pedestrian hazard. So the goal is to try and accommodate as many people as possible. I did note in looking at this draft that under 4 it says within a public right-of-way, which was a change. Does that mean we're allowing the state highway?
No, and I agree that there is a lack of clarity in that one item. This ordinance as written is the town right-of-way only. It does not contemplate the state right-of-way. I think it's possible that we could simply clarify that one area, Roger, but I think the rest of the ordinance is quite clear. But I agree that there is that omission of town right-of-way in that location you just identified.
Right, and it was sort of strange because the ordinance that's now on the books talks about the public right-of-way. And then when we wrote this, we, for some reason, put within the town right-of-way. And by just changing that to public, that would address the issue of Center Street.
So you're recommending?
No, I'm not recommending.
No, not recommending, but you're saying by
Making a
making that
statement.
change, yeah,
Yeah.
that would broaden it to include Center Street as well as Main Street, which is not included or contemplated in the ordinance as proposed.
Are you
Right.
suggesting that we have an imperfect ordinance here?
No, I'm suggesting that the ordinance is written with the committee's intent, I believe, and that was the town right-of-way. But one of the things that I am hearing is that there's an interest in broadening it to the state right-of-way. That's all we're saying, and that by taking out the reference to town, it would then open it up to any right-of-way. So I'm not
And that
either
would
I'm not
include
supporting or not supporting. I just think that that comment is correct.
You're suggesting amending the ordinance as presented tonight, changing the words within the town right-of-way to within the public right-of-way.
I'm not recommending that change.
Not,
Well, that
trying to
would
understand.
address the issue of Center Street and Main Street.
Right.
But I don't know, I've got two committee members down here.
Well, I know there was a reason why we didn't put it in the state right away, is because we wanted to have these things on the town-owned property in certain locations, and that was it.
Right, that was our jurisdiction. I had sort of remembered that discussion. Peter, do you have any thoughts on that issue?
I don't really have an opinion on that, and the change could be made by saying it's only in the right-of-way, by deleting the word town.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons we looked at it being in the town right-of-way was because we were concerned about signs on private property. We felt that, that could be abused. People could say, well, I don't like your business, I don't want you to put your sign there, or you can have it go to the highest bidder and you get some side business. And ideally, we wanted to be a level playing field for people who wanted to put up those signs.
There was actually quite a bit of discussion on that as to if it was a privately owned sign on somebody's own sign, who would be allowed to have theirs there.
And I think that, in terms of putting, being able to go in, if a business goes out, I think this ordinance reads correctly that there should not be the ability to put a sign back, a non-conforming sign back in that place. Because if you do that, then someone who moves into an empty storefront gets to put a sign up in a particular location, whereas someone coming into town and establishing a business doesn't get to do so. They have to go through the process and hopefully find a place on a conforming signpost. But certainly, I think, as this is drafted, there are multiple locations available to try and address the needs of those business owners, whether it's off Bay Street or in other non-Main Street locations. And I certainly would urge the board to go forward with this proposal as presented. I do have one question, and that is on 7C. And I think that as I read that, well, I think what it's supposed to say is that if all the signs are removed from a non-conforming signpost, then the non-conforming signpost needs to be removed. But I'm not quite sure that that reads that way.
And Roger, when you're referring to 7C, you're referring to the most recent draft of the ordinance with the legal comments within it?
Yep.
Okay.
Apparently your attorney and I are not in agreement here.
Let me take a quick read through just to confirm, just to review what you just said. I believe it does reflect it, but let me just take a read through.
If the signs expire, the post is gone.
Yeah, but they all have to expire.
Yes.
And the way this is written, it sounds as though one is expiring. I think it should read all pre-existing non-conforming signs lose their respective non-conforming status due to abandonment or the cessation of the associated business operations.
That's parsing it pretty fine.
No, I actually agree with Roger's comment. The intent was pretty clear from the committee here, and that was that if you had a signpost with 10 non-conforming signs, all of the if they're all non-conforming, 9 of them could be removed due to cessation of business, but the post would not be removed until the last sign was taken away. That is not what the attorney's recommendation says here. Attorney instead is saying if you have 10 non-conforming signs and 1 is removed, the post must be removed. No. Frankly, that is what the attorney's
reads.
I mean, that was
should any pre-existing non-conforming sign, lose their respective non-conforming status, the entire post which hosts such signs shall likewise lose its pre-existing.
What are you reading?
Specific.
The language that is proposed is should any pre-existing non-conforming sign, so that means any sign that's on a post, should any be removed, then due to abandonment or cessation, any non-conforming post which hosts such sign shall likewise lose its pre-existing non-conforming status. So again, if you had 10 signs and only 1 disappears due to cessation or abandonment, the entire post would then lose its non-conforming status, and the other 9 signs in the post would functionally be lost. And I don't think that was the committee's intent.
And I don't think the language in what was at the prior hearing
Did not say this.
did not
It
say
was
this
all.
either.
That text.
You're not looking,
This is what I have on
It's-
what was
did you look
reviewed
at
by
what's
the
over
planning
there?
board. Should all pre-existing non-expire. Those shall lose its.
That's exactly as presented in the proposed language for the ordinance. I have at least a copy of.
Right,
Matt, there's
I
a.
apologize for being not clear here, but
There's a problem with the documentation. I'm looking at a draft zoning amendment list dated November 2. And in November 2, under wayfinding sign 7C, I have language which doesn't correspond to what you read.
that's not surprising because the board and the public has been provided with an amended date of 12/19.
yeah.
Well, that's something that I do not have, and I apologize for not being.
It was in your packet, I believe, and that's what has been distributed to the public. A new draft of all of the amendment language.
Well, it
Okay.
wasn't,
okay.
I do not have it. I'll review it right now.
Okay? Do other board members have this issue as well? I need to know, because if that's an issue, then I think we have to deal with it now.
I'm looking at this document, and
And the date on it?
1219 draft.
Yes,
12/19/19,
correct.
and in C, it says, should, and all is crossed off, and any is underlined.
Right, that this was, I'm almost certain that that was the draft included in the board packets, and perhaps one person did not get it, but that's what was included. Kathy, are you having the same issue?
I'm looking at what we presented to the planning board, and I don't recall any changes.
The date is what?
Yeah, well, this was presented to the planning board on October 22nd.
So
And
he's
no, I know he's talking
It's
about
okay.
a
It
later
it
version.
may just simply be that I'm the exception here.
I apologize for the confusion, but in the most
No,
recent
it's
board
almost
packets,
certainly my mistake, not
I
yours.
provided a more,
But it,
with the legal comments on it, Kathy. I'm sorry for the confusion.
Yeah, okay.
I
So
mean, the
presuming,
language from the prior hearing was should all pre-existing non-conforming signs expire on a non-conforming signpost, the post shall lose its pre-existing non-conforming status and be removed. And this changes
Correct.
what that said.
That was based on council's review of the ordinance. They made that suggested modification,
Yeah, I
which
can see council's hand in here.
Okay. I don't think it's an issue. The noted,
No, it's not.
the language was posted correctly, but if the board feels uncomfortable, I think that's
Yeah.
an acceptable reason to continue it, definitely.
I would not say this is a substantial change. I think they're just trying to get the intent.
Right, and I'm only being sensitive to the fact I want to make sure the board members have the right information. So if that's the issue, then,
I have no problems any longer
oh, okay.
with this particular thing. Other things, maybe, but not this.
as long as the real language includes the word all and not any.
No, that Roger's point is still valid in that the council recommendation did make a change that I don't agree with. So
Right.
the updated version, I do not agree with council's recommendation to change that to any.
So
I believe that should say all, so I think if the board chooses to proceed with the ordinance tonight, it needs to make a recommendation to change that back to all, not the any that was listed.
And you should also put an S on operations.
Thank you,
Okay.
Roger.
All right. Okay, anything else, Mr. Murray?
I think that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
I have a question for the committee members. Why was it decided that we couldn't have back-to-back signs on the same post for the same business?
It's not that you can't have them back to back, it's just that if the maximum allowable is 2, back to back will be treated as 2 signs and not 1.
So why?
The reason for that was that there was concern about the volume of posts that would be available and the equity in allowing all businesses to have the ability to have a sign on a post.
So it could say Joe's Coffee on this side, and on the back side, it could say
It could.
Shirley's Pants.
Absolutely. Yep.
That example.
Right.
Maybe a bad example, but that, yes, that was the idea. There was a concern about the ability to have all businesses have equal access.
And then there was some signs like at Hunter's IGA, you don't even see the backside of them.
Right.
Right.
Right, so the committee, right, the committee felt that some of the backsides weren't even necessary or helpful to the business, and it might be better for them to have a sign in a different location.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Julie
Hey.
Jacobs. I was on that committee too.
Yes, you were.
I thought this was supposed to have the word pedestrian in there somewhere, that these are pedestrian directional signs, which would clear up a lot of problems that I keep hearing of people saying, oh, they can see it when they drive by. These are supposed to be used when you're walking. That's why they're in the specific locations that they are, next to people that are walking on sidewalks, not driving.
Yes, right. Well, that wording is not in there, but every time I've talked about this issue, I've always indicated that that was the direction of the committee.
Right. Can
to
we stick
focus
that
on
word back in there somewhere? Because isn't like part 2 and part 3 of what we were supposed to be looking at with the signage? Part 2 was drivable and part 3 was the big signs? That this was specifically pedestrian?
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
I think we can carve this up and call it many different things. I think what we have is we have a sign that directs people to a certain location, whether or not it's 1 inch or 3 inch, whether or not you're walking or you're driving. The consensus was that we were trying to open up for buses, where people come in and they get off the buses in the fall for tourists, and they get down there and then they can go on the rail trail and then they can walk into town and they can move around town. Obviously, yes, some of them are vehicles on the corners of roads. Again, we could carve it up so many different ways. They are what they are. And we're trying to place these things in areas where, yes, some cars will see them and some walkers will see them. I don't really see a problem in saying this is what we have.
Thanks, John. Roger, did you have something else?
I found another S. I would say I agree completely with what John just said. You know, I think we're really trying to come up with a good solution, and as has been pointed out, it's a complex thing, and we took a lot of input and spent a lot of time and effort thinking about it. On the last full line on 7C, there should be an S on signs.
Clarification on the wayfinding versus business directional. Wayfinding is for walkers. 1-inch letters would be great, and that would enable you to put an awful lot more signs on those 3 post locations that are in actually for walking traffic by those 2 parking lots in Fossfield and Glendon Street parking lot, and on the track path. And you could get a lot more signs and be a lot more fair for people that want signs there. But the ones that we're mostly concerned about, and the way this ordinance is written, it says business directional signs, and that's what these are. 4-inch letters that can be read at 40 miles an hour. Those are for the driving traffic. That's way the heck too big for anyone walking, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, well, I was just indicating what the committee was formed to do.
Yes,
that
and I'm
was,
indicating what
our
I had asked you to
direction,
do.
And if the planning board wants to give the committee new direction, that
Yeah.
certainly is something that we can.
And I'm indicating what I was trying to accomplish by doing this, and that is mostly for business directional signs that are big for driving traffic. Walking traffic is great for downtown, and that does need to be addressed, but it isn't addressed in this ordinance as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, any other public comments on the wayfinding signs? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing in the planning board. we need to, if we want to amend this, we need to do that tonight so that it can be legal.
Right, sorry.
Need to make the amendment tonight so that it can be legal noticed and we can have the hearing on the 20th.
21st.
If we want to make changes.
21st, Kathy.
On the 21st, when this third Tuesday.
I move that we amend 7C to include the word all instead of any.
Second.
As discussed, and add 2 S's and remove the letter A in front of the second line.
Okay, so that's a motion.
It's a motion.
Okay. Somebody want to make a second? Oh, he did, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, any other, just a second, don't get excited.
Very excited.
Any other changes the planning board wants to make? Because my feeling is that many of these changes that have been suggested were discussed by the committee. I would feel much better if we could go back to the committee with the changes and have the committee come back with a recommendation. Obviously, we can't do that for this warrant. But we do have an ordinance that at least would get the program started. And we may very well find that there are other issues that might have to be addressed. So that's just my personal feeling. I thought the committee worked well. As Julie said, we had other issues that we really wanted to get to. We had talked about kiosks, and I still think that's an important thing to look at. So I don't know how the rest of you feel.
I've been hearing signage has been an issue in this town for a very long time. In my opinion, and I was not a member of the subcommittee, reading over the proposed language to the ordinance is the best compromise that anyone has come up with so far to solve the current problem of signage. It's not the end, it's not the final ordinance. I'm sure there will be iterations later down the line. No ordinance lasts forever. They have to adapt to changing public needs, but this is the best that anyone's come up with so far, and I'd be happy to see it go through.
You're here.
Okay, other, so...
I'd like to see it go ahead the way it is.
With that one modification.
With those amendments.
We've already made a couple of the 2 amendments.
2 of them were clerical.
I feel that all 3 of them are clear. I don't feel that the third is substantial in nature.
Changing all to any to all?
I do not feel that it is. If the board has concern, we can certainly renotice it for 2 weeks from now.
I would also say that that change in 7C ends up making it a more reasonable statement.
I think given the fact that we've thrashed that out at some length here, been televised, and we've done it in front of the public, I don't see a need to run another public hearing since the people who are likely to show up at that time are in the audience right now and can and have had their chance to discuss those issues.
That may be true, but I would say that the finding should be whether it's substantial or not only, and if you feel it's
I do not think it's substantial. I think they're clerical.
Okay, and if you feel that way, then I do not think a new notice is required. I don't feel that's the case here, particularly when this was the draft that was publicized for the prior hearing. So this language has been seen by the public and subsequently amended by the board.
Okay,
We have concerns. We still have concerns from the public.
Mm-hmm. And
Specifically, number 5. Business directional signs shall be limited to a maximum of 2 within the town per business. That has been stated as a concern.
Mm-hmm.
And we have new businesses that have come to town. I feel that we need to do everything that we can to help them thrive. So I have a concern about number 5.
Okay, what would your suggestion be?
Well, we can talk about it, we can compromise. I mean, it's been asked to raise the number to 6. I think that if we could compromise and say 4, perhaps that would be workable.
I think that this is how I feel. We set up a subcommittee, staffed it with individuals, thrashed out the problem. They came up with the ordinance. It's our subcommittee. We've heard public hearings. The individuals who spearhead the public hearing on the changes had an opportunity to address the subcommittee with his concerns. Subcommittee has heard these concerns. We've heard the concerns. This is our subcommittee's report. I think we have to stand by our subcommittee. And as I said, this is not the end ordinance on signs that we'll ever hear. We're going to be having to rethink this again and again as businesses change, more businesses come into town. But I think at this late date, to make substantive changes to the ordinance, as you're suggesting, Susan, is going to mean that we may not get an ordinance on the warrant in 2020 at all. It's going to be held open, because if we hold a hearing on the 21st and there are still issues left open, where do we go? I think we should move this to the warrant at this part and understand that there are probably issues that are going to continue to drive public comment and address them as they come up.
Right, well, as I said earlier, I think once Matt's staff is going to be implementing this, you may very well run into some issues that hadn't occurred to us. I mean, this is sort of new territory for us.
I certainly acknowledge this is not a perfect ordinance, but it's a good starting point, I think. I do think that I'll have to update the board regularly on whether this is actually working for the office, particularly as we begin to set up the structure for permitting application and that sort of thing. So I fully anticipate that if not next year, this comes back within the next 2 years to the board for some sort of modification based on issues that we start to run into, one of which could very well be a volume of requests. We may just have a lot of folks that want these signs, and we may have to adjust the ordinance to deal with that, or the board may want to consider that. But we don't know yet. It's sort of untested in that sense. I think we should give this ordinance a chance, but go to the board.
Well, if there are 3 or 4 sites between Main Street and Bay Street and Pine Hill Road area, and you can put 4 signs on those posts, that literally limits it to 12 businesses. And I believe that in that business district, there are more than 12 possible businesses. And so therefore, I think that if you allow 4 on a sign or 4 in town or whatever it is, that precludes a lot of the businesses which are out there. And I'm also a reasonably firm believer that many people in their automobiles use GPS to navigate. Right. And these signs in their cars are irrelevant. And so when you're a long way out on Bay Street, you're not depending on wayfinding signs, you're looking at your GPS. So I think 2 signs is just fine.
Okay. Any other comments? John?
I make a motion, we move amendment number 5, wayfinding sign ordinance, existing language 175-44E, and proposed language 175-44E, placement to the warrant.
And recommend.
I'll second that.
Okay, as amended.
As amended.
As amended.
Okay. All right. Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, folks, thank you very much.
May I just ask for clarification on that vote, Susan? Did you vote? We need either.
I will abstain.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. What my thought is to take the suggested changes back to the committee. I think most of the committee members are here. And and we'll discuss the changes again, and then we'll be hearing about this, I think, next year. So thank you very much for your time and patience. Okay, next item is a continuation of the personal wireless service facilities ordinance, which is actually bringing our ordinance into compliance with state and federal requirements. We're addressing issues that were brought up at the master plan discussions. And I think one thing, Matt, that maybe we didn't make clear last time was that for these facilities, new facilities, there is an approval process, and that requires, it's a special exception as well as a site plan. So while we are allowing flexibility in co-location and things of that nature for new facilities, they would still have to go through the same process and be camouflaged.
Yeah, one of the critical issues that we discussed at the prior hearing was the need for camouflage. And I actually reviewed the ordinance with council and have made one slight modification that's both in the public version of the document that was posted online and in the board packets this evening. And that is to clarify within the location section of the ordinance, and I'll circle back to this in a second, but to clarify within this location section of the ordinance that that all facilities are required to be camouflaged, and we did that by taking out the language that was in here that said that new non-camouflaged facilities would be allowed in those zoning districts that we had reviewed prior. I had made a statement at the last public hearing that we would require camouflage for all facilities, and there was really a contradiction in the zoning ordinance that would have created clarity issues for applications moving forward. So I think we've addressed that issue. But as Kathy said, the primary objectives of the changes being made this year are to simply bring the ordinance into compliance with RSA 12K and applicable federal law. We've particularly focused on the eligible facilities requests under 12K and the expedited review process within the planning department for those applications. The board has heard about this quite a bit, and we did have Attorney Grill at the prior meeting to discuss that. Additionally, in reviewing the ordinance, we identified that several of the zoning districts that were listed within the ordinance no longer existed. The most recent version of the ordinance was from 2001. It included several references to our general residential districts that existed at that time. You may remember folks at the last meeting showed that really the GR zones covered a good portion of the town, but those zoning districts no longer exist. So what we've proposed is to allow new camouflaged facilities in all zoning districts with the exception of the shorefront residential district, and that's what the language now reads. And again, I think we've clarified that by adding some language around the camouflaging requirement. Additionally, there are some minor changes. I do want to note the two that I think are of any consequence are revising the definition of fall zone, not in any way that would change the meaning of the ordinance, but just an administrative change, and also just providing some clarity around painted gray towers, which our council had advised us to make a change on. Those, again, I think are minor changes. The board had already seen those, but really the substantial changes are the location, the district boundary changes, and the 12K amendments that we've made within that 175, 162A.
Okay, with that, thank you. I'll open the public hearing, or reopen the public hearing on this item. So anyone that wants to make a comment, come on up.
Okay, Suzanne Ryan. Again, I'm caught a little unprepared and off guard about the change that you made about camouflage. In your handout for tonight, third line up from the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You see it where I'm at? To require camouflage of all facilities. Good thing.
Yep.
But then it says, not subject to eligible facilities requests. What is that?
Sure. So the eligible facilities requests are those non-substantial modifications that we had discussed at the prior meeting that increase a tower height below 10% of the height. Those substantial modifications that we had discussed, and I'll pull those up because I planned that this might, or I figured this might be a question tonight. Anything that does not meet, that exceeds the definition of a non-substantial modification, that is subject to the full planning board and potentially zoning board review process, whereas eligible facilities requests under 12K are subject only to an expedited administrative review by the planning department through a building permit application. So what I'm saying is that new eligible facilities requests are required to discuss camouflage, but they aren't required to have a new burden of camouflage under the zoning ordinance that's proposed.
So if someone's making a minor modification, they may not have to be camouflaged.
It depends on the initial approval that was granted for the site. But if you had a site that was not required to be camouflaged initially, I do not believe that we will be permitted to require camouflage based on the ordinance that's being proposed.
Okay, so then...
And just a practical example is if you had a steel tower and a non-substantial modification was being done, I don't believe the town has, under the proposed ordinance, the ability to say that should be a tree-style design, a monopine-style expansion.
I follow.
So,
okay.
yeah.
So then now let me ask you, with this modification, under 175, 161,
Yep.
page 5
Sure.
of the complete document,
Yep.
what's going to happen with that language? Location requirements for new non-camouflaged exterior facilities, by special exception, all zoning districts.
So as proposed and as amended in the document that you have, the way this will actually read is location requirements for new facilities, period. No, the non-camouflage language is crossed out of there. And the reason for that is that in the design standards portion of the ordinance, which is a bit later, we require that all facilities demonstrate camouflage. So it doesn't need to be addressed here because it's addressed more specifically in the design standards section. Whereas the existing ordinance, I argued and council agreed that there's actually a contradiction between this section and the design standards. And that we've resolved that, I think.
Okay, so then that takes care of, and I might be redundant in my conversation here, but it does make quite a difference, an improvement. So 175, 164, and this is mount types of transmission
Suzanne, I'm sorry.
to buildings. On page 8,
Yep.
175, 164A.
Yes.
All right, and this is mounted to buildings, which is different from ground mount. And you have, unless the facility is completely camouflaged. So is that going to stay in there as it's written?
Yes.
Okay, and then the ground mount, it talks about above tree level and so forth, the average. It says, the last line on page 9, number 2, non-camouflaged facilities shall not be placed in open fields or meadows. That's going to stay.
That would stay. I mean, I would argue that doesn't have much utility because we're not allowing non-camouflaged facilities, but it is staying in the proposed ordinance.
Good.
Okay.
And then 175, 165, performance standard, page 10, B. Okay. Number 1, visibility / camouflage. Personal wireless service facilities shall be camouflaged as follows. And so the criteria for what is to be camouflaged is all going to stay.
That's correct. No changes there.
Okay. All right, so then to the ordinance. That takes care of a lot of my concerns, by the way.
Okay.
But not knowing that was going to happen, I still did up some comment. And I've got copies for everybody and some informational material that may be useful down the line. But, all right, I understand. I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to come into compliance with FCC regulations, and you're trying to keep ahead of an applicant that comes into town that wants to put the 5G downtown, which isn't going to happen forever, until forever. I don't know as though you know, because you're probably not in the minutia of this stuff, but some of it I'm sure.
I can tell you I'm not a telecommunications expert, but
Yeah, well, it's
I'll
very, very complex.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm doing the best I can with it, but the FCC regulations, which, by the way, are still taking comment from large cities in opposition to some of the regulations which take place in towns and cities, taking their control away, that they're being sued by, California or someplace like that. So, so you don't have to get all nervous and get this thing done now, perfect, because there's chances are there's going to be a lot of changes keep coming. So you're going to have to keep on top of this and keep amending it. So that I've got the camouflage thing. All right. One of the problems I feel as though I see with this is that you're trying to write some standard for and define what would be for towers, and then what could be for poles, street lamps, and the like.
This ordinance does not contemplate any activity within the public right-of-way. That is purely the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. So this ordinance deals only with activity on private property. That's the planning board's only jurisdiction. So when it comes to...
Oh, I thought I saw something in the right-of-way.
This is
maybe
only...
that's the Cotton Mountain zoning change.
This is really only intended to deal with personal wireless facilities on privately owned property, because the planning board's jurisdiction does not extend to the right-of-way.
And that includes a town piece of land, like Whiteface?
Well, town land, if it's for a governmental use, it would be exempt under 674-54, so it wouldn't be subject then. The planning board still reviews those projects, but
this ordinance would be used for a town piece of property.
I would argue that if the town were erecting telecommunications equipment, that if it's for a governmental use, it would be exempt, but if it's a private development company coming in to erect private telecommunications infrastructure, even on public property, it will be subject to this ordinance.
Where does it tell us that this is written for public property? I mean, private property.
It doesn't say that clearly, but the planning board's only jurisdiction is over private property, is development on private property. Within the public right-of-way...
Well, if it's town property, the planning board still tries to make town...
But town property is privately owned.
Comply with whatever the ordinances are.
Right, I understand that, but it doesn't clearly say it. I agree with you there, but I think it's implied jurisdictionally that the planning board does not have that authority over particularly the public right-of-way. Talking about public...
Answer.
What's that?
Implied jurisdiction.
I'm sorry?
It's implied jurisdiction.
Implied where?
Oh, okay.
Well, we've done...
Under state
Okay,
statute.
all right.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
it's-
so, then maybe that will not, because of that, what I just heard might not apply here, but
Yeah.
because I've written it up, some of it will, some of it
Okay.
won't, so may I continue with this
Yes,
anyway?
yes, please do.
Let's see. With the evolution of technology, fifth generation, that may eventually come our way, large macro traditional standalone cell towers that we are familiar with broadcasting a long way so you do not need a lot of them, they will diminish. I don't see them proliferating, I see them diminishing. And I doubt we will see many more within Wolfeboro, especially with such a strong co-location provision, and I'm glad you got cleaned that up so that, because we did have a real problem with that with one of our applicants. What is important for planning is to understand that the rollout, and I'm going to talk about 5G because it's going to come down the pike eventually, you're going to be dealing with it, so I'm perhaps premature talking about it, but the rollout of 5G will be centered on the cities first and then most densely populated areas of each city, downtowns near hospitals, industry, etc. Then in the rest of the cities as well as suburban, but also densely populated suburban areas. Then along major highways, and finally in smaller cities and towns. This is exactly the way wireless has been rolled out, and this will be no different as its extension. What we may be seeing is lots and lots of small cells being hung on street lamps, poles, and rooftops, short range, so there has to be a large number of them in densely packed network. It is expensive for carriers to install, and that's why it makes sense for them to target large, densely populated areas. Because you have not done the updated map or a consolidation map, nor is the town website correct. The town website is not correct as to our coverage, showing coverage. I think you might, and I say be misguided on camouflage, but that can go by the wayside. We have to currently know what we have. We have to see what we have now so we know what we need. And that mapping is very important. We know we have the water tank, we have 2 or 3 carriers on there, we have the town-approved antennas on Bennett Hill that has added and approved to add AT&T and Verizon upgrades. And that's not on our radar. And others such as the old Bell building that has rooftop mount stuff. The major towers are not the issue. The issue is where will the town want the poles? So I'd like you to be projecting ahead in your thought process is that when this comes in 5 or 10 years, and it's not out of the realm forever, that we be learning about and thinking about design and placement. I'm skipping through this because some of it's been covered in our discussion. So I would just say that the town should be proactive and do some research and decide what things it wants, who should build it. The town should and lease the space on poles before you, all right, and then to circle back, I would request that we address the view shed issue that I'm not sure how that's addressed, and I can't see that it is, other than camouflage. I don't think that these towers, although I'll say I don't see a lot of them being built, should be in the view shed area, and whether they're camouflaged or not. And I don't know why you have all areas for special exception to allow towers in the town of Wolfeboro that is so special, and to put them in, to be allowed to be put in the view shed area, I think is a misstep, and they should be prohibited as well as the shorefront. So that's my request for some sort of language or protection. And I got the impression that there was not a whole lot of discussion about that at the time of drafting this. So I don't know what to say to do about it at this point.
If you remember, Suzanne, when you and I were on the ZBA, we had the case of the Pierce Camp, Birchmont tower, and we had a discussion of how visible it would be at the time, and you provided us with a photograph of the location as seen from your porch. And the issue of view shed came up. And what is a view shed? And how does a view shed get interrupted by a tower or a new building or whatever it might happen to be? And if you can remember, there is no definition of a view shed. A view shed is simply how far you can see from wherever you are.
That is not correct in this ordinance. I do want to speak to that. There is a view shed definition in this ordinance and very specific restrictions.
I understand.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Well,
I
can
didn't
you,
interfere.
can you tell me what it is? Maybe it addresses my concern.
I want to let Mike finish because I interrupted him.
The simple fact was that in some places, a view shed is 30 miles. In other places, a view shed is a couple of feet. Depends on where you are at the time. View shed is subjective, and it really depends on where the viewer is at the time. We have definition of view shed, and but it's, as you remember, it's very bare bones. It's not terribly well defined, and you don't really know exactly how to apply it because there is no strict definition of a view shed.
Somewhere out there, I've seen a list of view shed areas.
In town, yes, there is.
There's even a referenced map within this ordinance. So if you look at page 13, and it's section 175, 165, 6. There's very detailed, there is some even dimensional measurement in here of the impact of scenic landscapes and vistas on the regulation, particularly of design standards for these personal wireless facilities. Additionally, within the definitions section
Also in the definition.
the definitions section of the ordinance.
Scenic views and view sheds.
Correct.
Now,
I will be
ordinance.
I'll be very honest, there has been difficulty finding the map that this ordinance references. In fact, I think even Peter Cook may have asked me for this map at one point in time, and I had a difficulty locating it. We do need to do some more work on that, but scenic views and view sheds are contemplated by the ordinance, and per 175, 165, 6, they are given some unique sense of protection under the language that exists and will continue into the future.
Well, I'll see if I can find the list, and I'll see if I can find a map.
Yeah, there is.
There's a list in the 2007 master plan.
I do know that, but I remember, because I looked into the issue, there's some discrepancy between that list and the map that's referenced by this ordinance. So that may be something we need to look at, but there is a protection built in there.
Okay.
And then I have one last question on this new document.
Mm-hmm.
A draft document that's new to me anyway.
That was provided at the last hearing.
It was?
It was.
I must have missed it. On the first page, next to the bottom item, number 3.
Okay.
Okay? The term includes any structure other than a tower. So are we talking there again about property mount?
Could be equipment enclosures, could be something of that nature. So accessory structures to the facility itself.
So this is for the accessory structure?
So yeah, I think if you're looking, yeah, this is under the base station section of this. And I apologize, indent this better, but that is actually, that number 3 is under the base station provision of the eligible facilities request language. So that applies to equipment that's at the base station of a facility.
All right. That answers all my questions, but I'd still like to leave this bunch of paper.
You can leave it with me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, other comments on cell towers on the proposed ordinance? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. Planning board members, how do you want to proceed? People comfortable with what is being proposed?
Mm-hmm.
And as Suzanne just said, this may be another one that we keep revisiting.
I think we should revisit it more than every 19 years.
Yes, right.
I think that's one thing that we've learned from this, that we, particularly with the way this technology is evolving, we probably should come back in a couple years or, sooner than that to look at it, because the technology is always changing.
And there are new procedures that you're going to be following, and if there are issues that come up, we're going to want to know about them if there are things we can address.
Yeah, and to Suzanne's point, and Mike has raised this issue as well, some of this does remain to be litigated within the courts, and I think that there will be further guidance on some of these matters. So I think it's definitely an issue we want to keep our ear to the ground on.
Okay, so I've closed the public hearing. Would somebody like to make a motion to recommend the amendment as presented and move it to the town warrant for consideration? Okay, motion has been made. Do you want to second the motion?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Yeah. And you're... Oh, okay, and one abstention.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Pine Hill Road Development District, the permitted uses and special exceptions.
Madam Chair, I'm going to recuse myself again for this one.
Okay. All right. Get to the right paper here.
Just to begin, if I could quickly, this new language that was available up there and provided to the board, the only changes in there are non-substantial changes based on legal counsel comments. There are no other recommended changes that were made based on the public hearing or based on further review by myself. They're all based on legal comment, and I hope that you agree they don't make any substantial change to the language of the ordinance.
Okay, and we did make some changes, removed some permitted uses and added contractor yard light. But actually, we did that after looking at the purpose of this particular zone, which specifically says it's an area to provide for business and office facilities, contractor facilities, and services associated with the contractor facilities. So it seems from my recollection that was what we were focusing on when we looked at the uses. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this item. And anyone that wants to make some comments on the Pine Hill Road Development District changes?
I'm Elaine Hazeltine. I live on Pine Hill Road. Public speaking is not my forte, but I'll do my best to ask you the questions I need to at this point. So my understanding is that you want to move some of the special permitted uses to permitted uses. Those, a couple of them are new. They were not on any of the lists before. One is retail, the other is businesses. The two that were on the special permits before were contractor yards and light with special conditions required. I would ask for some justification under those four. I look at retail as very broad. What is your definition of retail? Do you want to amend this now and define what retail is going to be when it comes up? And the same thing for businesses. Regarding contractor yards, that is under a special use permit now. It may be permitted. I think if you put it under permitted uses, it makes it easier for someone to come in for pretty much anything. And the four definitions under there, I did want to point out under the permitted uses, and I have to, get to it. I'm looking at the code that I took off the website. The first one says that the proposed use, including all improvements but excluding structures addressed by section 175-95A, is our setback at 25 feet from the front property line and at least 25 feet from all other lot lines. The side and rear setback areas shall be reserved as a natural vegetable buffer. But then I go back down to where was initially listed as a special use. It says 75 feet from the property line. Is there a discrepancy there?
No, the contractor's yard light, which is a less intense use, the buffer is intended to be smaller, the 25 feet that's listed there, versus a contractor's yard, which is the heavier equipment. The ordinance intends for those uses to be set back 75 feet. So heavier equipment, bigger setback, smaller equipment, smaller setback.
So, without naming names, we already have a contractor yard on my side of the road, which is probably under special permit. I'm actually on the right-hand side of the road, not the commercial side of the road. I'm in a butter. And so objections to permitting contractors' yards is that I don't see in any of these, and it may be in your rules, time of day when people can start work or when they end, weekends, or if there's any type of limitation on that at all. And for most of the year, we hear saws starting at 4:30 in the morning and ending at 7:30 at night. We also see debris on the lawn, and it's certainly not 25 feet from the road. And it's a residence as well as a contractor's yard. And so when you permit this, these are the things as a resident that we see that we have to live with each day. And so I guess I need to understand what your justification is for amending it to a permitted use at this point.
So can we get some clarification? You said it's on your side of the road, which...
I'm on the right hand, I'm on the odd side of the road.
That's not going to be the proposed district.
That's right, it is not.
But I'm in a butter.
I understand that. I'm trying to get to the bones of this. What sounds like you're explaining to me is a pre-existing, it's a non-conforming situation where I don't think that has any bearance on this new one going through.
John's right. That is. I'm assuming I know what location you're talking about, and without naming names, that location is a pre-existing non-conforming use, meaning that it was not approved as a contractor's yard under this ordinance. It predated the zoning that exists there today.
So does that mean it's grandfathered?
Yes, it does. So these standards that we're proposing here, in fact, I don't think for contractors' yards have been used since this ordinance was initially put in place for a contractor's yard in the Pine Hill Road Development District.
Right.
So I believe all of the quasi-contractors' yards that are there are either there via variance or via a pre-existing non-conforming use designation. So I think those may not be the best or supporting evidence to what's being proposed here because they weren't approved under this ordinance. Hopefully that answers that.
Okay, but again, I think I need to understand why you want to switch from special use to permitted use.
Well, we haven't.
I mean, shouldn't each situation, I mean, they have to come for their permits and before they can put anything in place anyways, they have to come to the planning board. But doesn't it make it easier for them to bring in a business or bring in a contractor's yard if it's permitted if it is voted that it is a permitted use versus it may be a permitted use under special exception?
There is an extra step.
Exactly.
For the special exception.
And it has to go before the planning board.
Zoning board.
The zoning board.
Yep.
Right.
That's, yeah.
But there are two different uses. We're talking about contractors' yards And then in the permitted use, we're talking about light contractors' yards. And that's where the purpose of the zone is to...
So when you say light, are we talking about light industry?
No, that refers to lighter equipment being stored on site. That's what the light designation is on contractor's yard.
Okay, and then I guess, so that answers that, but you have a new definition for light industry, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Because below, that also was under a special use under industry, and you changed industry to light industry. Are you able to easily access the light industry definition again?
Yes, I am. That is another item on our agenda. I can certainly put it up there as reference, though. That is the proposed definition.
Remember, the industry is now the special exception use that's in the ordinance, and we're trying to have a use that had
You're trying to change it to light industry.
Yes, to have
But
less...
then you're trying to move the light industry into permitted use.
No, it's in the special exception.
Okay, so I guess the question becomes, what does light mean with special conditions required?
So, under the special exception uses.
No, under permitted uses, if I read your agenda, it says, hold on.
Well, and it's the light contractor's yard.
I think I know what you're referring to. You're referring to the just on the back side of the page, it says contractor's yard of light, and then in parentheses with special conditions required. I think that's what you're referring to. Those special conditions that are required are the 4 criteria listed below, right, listed below the proposed use within the zoning ordinance document.
I suggest that maybe there should be a hyphen instead of a comma. Contractor's yard hyphen light, not comma.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
we would...
And I guess, again, I fall back to the retail, which is a very broad definition. And businesses is a very broad definition. It doesn't tell me anything. I mean, can someone come in with a McDonald's?
McDonald's is a restaurant.
Well, but I mean, you can
No, they
take your
could not.
product-
That would be a restaurant.
It would be a
All right,
restaurant.
then a clothing store.
Yes, a clothing store could potentially go in.
Yes, a clothing store could go over there.
Okay. And businesses is very broad.
Business services?
This says businesses on your,
Business services.
on the new code that I'm looking at.
Business...
I'm sorry, it does say M, business services.
Yeah.
Yeah. Business services are defined in the ordinance, and they're defined as establishments primarily engaged in rendering services to business establishments on a feeder contract basis, such as advertising and mailing, building maintenance, employment, service, managing and consulting services, protective services, office equipment rental and leasing, commercial research, development and testing, photo finishing, and personal supply services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments about Pine Hill?
Okay. I took a different approach. First, and again, let's look at the direction the residents wanted via the UNH survey in 2016. Only 15% thought the land area needed or be provided for commercial and light industry uses, and less than half believed it is important for the town to provide it. On the other hand, in addressing residential growth in downtown Wolfeboro Falls area and adjacent to Wolfeboro Falls area, was favorable by 41 and 31% for residential growth. The proposal as written, purpose on the surface sounds good to protect the form and function of Pine Hill Road. Good so far. But it says the corridor, and that is in your definition of the ordinance. Where does the corridor begin and end? 2011 zoning amendment to Pine Hill states, as proposed on the zoning map. What, if this is to go through, I feel you need to be specific where these uses you propose are allowed, and that should be your number one priority. So can you tell me?
Yep, absolutely. The boundaries of the Pine Hill Road Development District are defined clearly within 175-2 down to the tax map and lot. So we know exactly where the Pine Hill Road Development District begins and ends. And that is shown on the most recent copy of the zoning map. It is very clear.
Okay.
And I'm happy to pull that up too if the board feels any need. I think it might be helpful. So I'm not pulling up the language, I'm pulling up the map of the area,
right.
just to be clear.
Where is it in the ordinance, 175 what?
It's in 175-2?
2?
Correct.
I don't have that.
175-212 Pine Hill Road Development District, and begins at a point, it's, a typical zoning district description of boundary, but it begins at a point, the southernmost corner of 190-22, and extends all the way up, and reading the zoning district description, all the way up to, difficult for me to pick out an exact map and lot number, but obviously up to the extent of the Wolfeboro Business Park. That is the furthest extent of the Pine Hill Road Development District.
Does that include the land bank land?
The land bank land, no, is
Okay.
this property right here, I believe. Yes,
okay.
it is.
It backs up to it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that
Yep,
clarification. Then you go on to say, under purpose, to provide for businesses and office facilities. As you just read the definition, that's great. Why isn't it just kept for that? I mean, that is perfect. But then you add contractors' facilities. And then it's spelled out yet it's spelled out as a contractor's yard light. And in your preamble, or whatever you want to call it, you say contractor's facility. And that purpose, I called it a preamble, your purpose.
Yep.
So is it a facility or is it a contractor's yard?
It says
light?
contractor facilities and the services associated with.
Okay, thank you for
so-
clarifying that.
Yeah.
Okay, so next what I tried to do is see what was in and what was taken out and what was changed, what was removed, what was swapped around. And so some of it was when you add your new definition of light industry. But we were going good with the beginning, with the businesses and so forth. I mean, that area is suited perfectly for that sort of thing, as an extension of the Falls area. So what I pulled out, it would have been nice, probably you could do it easy, and you'll correct me where I'm wrong, if we had 2 columns, what was removed, what was added, what was changed. But what I did was I came up with what was removed was printing plant, community service, laundries, cleaning establishment, and kennels. Those probably could have been left in. Storage and use of heavy industrial or mechanical equipment was removed, but you'll see it come up in another place. Don't be fooled by that. Moved assembly operations to light industry and move metal shops to light industry within manufacturing, processing, fabrication, and assembly. Not good. added storage to include storage of equipment. What equipment? Kept the same was contractor's yard light. And just I'd like to point out that we do have on Route 109, up my end of town, we had a big fight about all of that with the gravel pit and everything, but it ended up being a contractor's yard light. Hardly used. So I don't think we need one on Pine Hill. Also kept business services and retail. Good. But then we added, then we kind of messed it up, in my view, in that area, by adding light industry. This is where I feel the residents and the taxpayers, myself, and you, I feel you have gone off the rails and feel the area is not suitable for such. What you've taken out is insignificant as to what you propose to add by definition, and uses allowed in it. And the word in your definition talks about predominantly, previously prepared is subjective. Somewhere about the previously prepared metal or something in the light industry. There's about manufacturing, there's something in there, but you say predominantly. You'll get to that when you get the other ordinance, but predominantly is not a tangible thing. The town of Wolfeboro is in great shape as far as zoning goes. People are not banging down the planning department's door with applications for light industry or much commercial, for that matter of fact. Wolfeboro is a position. We are the oldest summer resort in America, not the new light industrial town. Wolfeboro has a vibrant downtown, except for 4 or 5 larger cities. Where else does that exist today? Meredith struggles. Laconia downtown is losing rather than gaining businesses, and its low-cost housing has placed a huge burden on social services and Lakes Region Hospital, growing pressure for many patients that can't pay for their treatment. On the other hand, Wolfeboro has a lot of prime real estate that provides great tax revenue. It has a hospital, a good facility for senior citizens who also provide a lot of discretionary income for the stores and services that virtually no other town its size has. There is a great recreation in all areas of town year-round, both summer and winter. Activities abound. It should continue being what it is, because virtually, no other town of this size in New Hampshire, except perhaps Port, Dartmouth, or Keene, offer the ambiance Wolfeboro has, and neither of them have a huge lake. What Wolfeboro does not have are any large industries and few small industries. Why? It has no direct interstate access, no railroad, no easy route to Boston. If you were to draw a ring around cities that attract millions, even perhaps include Nashua and Manchester, Wolfeboro is not even in the orbit. Bring in workforce housing and 5G will not solve the problem of distance, lack of infrastructure, lack of easy access, lack of easy travel through town, and lack of things for younger people to do, especially in the winter. Then there's the reality that most younger people, and hopefully me too, are gravitating to warmer climates, a problem that all northern tier states are experiencing. Planner's solution for every town and city seem to be the same.
Can I make a comment? I have repeatedly brought up the fact that we should have a 5-minute rule. People should be allowed to speak. Everybody should get a chance. There are people who have left the building because we are going on and on and on.
They left the building because of sign, that they finished
No,
with their
there were some
sign.
other people who left, I think, because they didn't get a chance to speak.
I'm almost done, and you haven't
I'm
had a
just
time
talking
limit
in general
before.
to the board, because I keep bringing this up, and
I turned around and offered for anyone else to step
Yeah,
forward,
okay, all
and
right. Could
I
you
was
please
recognized by the chair.
Could you please continue?
All right. Planner solutions for every town or city seem to be the same, but the reality is that the solutions for many cities are very different. Wolfeboro is unique and diverse, and as shown by the demographics, natural resource, open space, and land use, as outlined in the master plan. And of course, the lake that we are all spending much-needed dollars on to preserve. What Wolfeboro needs is to simply get better at what we do and what it is. A pleasant, interesting, and very attractive place to live for all citizens, older citizens, and the older citizens who bring in their families. It would be a shame to ruin the Wolfeboro, what Wolfeboro is, in some misguided attempt to become something different. So my request is keep it simple. Make some of the changes you have done within the existing text and do not propose the light industrial definition or any other way of promoting light industrial on Pine Hill Road. And I have a copy of this I'll leave with Matt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on Pine Hill Road Development District?
I won't be long. I'll try and be succinct. It's been a long night, so my name is Kirk Beswick. I'm here on behalf of Taylor Community. I just had a few comments. You should have received a letter. I drafted and sent to the board. I copied Matt on as well. And that summarized our position basically in reference to a lot of the amendments that we have here tonight. A couple of things I want to comment on was specifically reiterate what I had said in my letter and at the last meeting, where I think you've worked very hard to try and come up with a compromise to make this work by taking out some uses and putting some other ones in. And I think the only comment I had that I think needs to be addressed is the contractor yard, because we've rattled that around a lot and we've talked about it. And, you know, we already have a lot of these other things existing, but the contractor yards I see is going to be a problem in the future if they are allowed to be developed. And we talked about that at the last meeting. You know, we talked about the beepers of the trucks, and other speakers this evening have talked about, you know, coming and going at 4 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, you know, in a mixed-use area that's not going to be very desirable. And I agree with the fact that that would be probably one of the things that I wouldn't have put into this particular district. We have kind of come up with a couple other ideas that I want to float and what our recommendations would be. And I know it might be a little off topic, but when I think about this, the first thing I have is a question for Matt. And the question would be, when we consider this, the Pine Hill Road Development District compared with the Bay Street Limited Commercial District, which would you say has the lighter usage and less commercial by regulation?
I would just answer by saying the less intense permitted uses in the traditional sense are in the Bay Street Limited Business District.
We allow hotels in Bay Street.
Yes, we do, but you know, if you consider industry to generally be the most intense use, then Pine Hill Road development is a more intense use. But certainly there's as we've discussed, there's a mix of uses.
And I guess I was asking, let me explain why I was thinking about that, and that led me into thinking about our conversation earlier today, where, you know, when you look at the map, you have the Bay Street Limited Commercial District here, then you swing out onto Pine Hill, it becomes a totally different district. It's the same neighborhood essentially, but then now we've broken it into and parsed a separate whole way of regulating what's up there. And one of the suggestions we were thinking about, Taylor anyways, was that why wouldn't we just consider wrapping that into one district that has kind of a more centralized way of controlling the usage there. In other words, kind of looking more toward the Bay Street and extending that and creating one unified district that has a lighter usage. When I come to these meetings, what I'm hearing sitting in the back is some of the the abutters who are saying, you know, these things aren't really that bad, but when you put them in a transitional area that's vacillated between residential and commercial, you wind up having a bunch of irritated people that are constantly saying, don't do this, don't do this. And we're trying to wrestle with what things are going to be allowable there. Maybe we should take a step back and say, maybe we should rethink this and say, what is a way to create a transitional buffer there that's a little bit more lighter in nature, that still develops economic activity, that allows some of these businesses to flourish, but would work with all the types of existing businesses that are already there. So that's our first suggestion. The second suggestion would be, and I agree with something that Suzanne said, that it doesn't appear that there's a lot of pressure on the town to create a heavy industrial area here, based on permits being pulled, whatever. And if there is, or in the future there is, one of our suggestions would be to take the far end of that Pine Hill development area in an area that's not heavily abutted, if you want to put it that way, with residential properties, and create another district that has some of these industrial contractor yards and put them up there where they're not going to have the impact on the traditional or somewhat residential areas that we're currently talking about now on Pine Hill and Bay Street. And you've already heard my comments relative to what our future looks like, so obviously some of this is self-serving, but we're trying to think of the future down the road, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. What do we want this to look like? And knowing that Wolfeboro is a destination town where, vacation land is the primary objective, really focusing on creating more industrial usage probably isn't in our best interest, but finding a way to collaborate on usage that would benefit all of the town, and including the residential butters and even Taylor community might be a better way to focus. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just make one very quick clarifying
I was
comment?
going to ask you if you could comment on the number of contractors at the last public hearing. I thought that was really interesting, that's one of our leading occupations.
Yeah, one of the things that, to clarify, we don't get a lot of questions in our office about industrial uses. I've been pretty honest, I think, about that with the board. And when I say industrial uses, I mean fabricating something on site. We don't get a whole heck of a lot of questions about that. We do get, more than any use by far, we get questions about contractors' yards, whether it's storage of materials or parking vehicles for contractors. We get more questions about that. I would say 4 times the amount of questions for any other use about that specific one. And it's almost laughable in the sense that the recommendation is that Pine Hill Road Development District is the only district in which this is really allowed by right now through any easy process. And we're quickly told, almost in every situation, that they'd prefer to go to Ospey or some other community. And the reason why I think that's important, and it may be acceptable to have some of them in other communities, contracting is probably, in my opinion, although the numbers may not show it this way, it is the #1 industry in this community. When I say contracting, I mean landscaping, I mean general home repair, I mean full building construction. That is the #1 industry, at least in my experience here within the town. And I would argue that our zoning is not very reflective of that. I would also just make one other comment outside of that, and that is that the survey done for the master plan, there's no question about what it says. I think it's very clear that when you survey the community, you quickly find that a very small percentage want increased industrial and commercial use. But I would argue that our zoning is very reflective of just that, and that is that less than 5% of the land area of the town is zoned commercially, and in fact, I believe it's under 3% or even 2%. I believe our zoning is a good reflection of what the community's interests are today. And I would just emphasize the fact that this is not a proposed boundary amendment. The planning board is not proposing, as it did, quite honestly, last year, to amend the district boundary to go across the street. It is seeking only to respond to the comments that it heard at the public hearings last year to create some less intense use structure within the current zone.
Master plan.
And at the master plan. So I am sensitive to a lot of the comments that we've heard tonight, but I believe that this planning board action and what's being proposed this evening is a direct reaction, A, to the requests that we're getting in the Planning and Development Department, and B, to the input that the planning board heard last year as part of the 2019 amendment process when they put forward a more aggressive proposal that was ultimately removed from the warrant article. So I'm supportive of this, although I'm not a voting member, obviously, because we deal with a lot of the folks that I think could benefit from an amendment like this being done. And I think, frankly, in the future, we need to look at the boundary and make sure it makes sense. I know that we are directly adjacent to a lot of residential properties and even commercially zoned residential properties that I still think deserve some protection. I think we should open a conversation about the boundary, but I think this is the first step. And I say that because this really is a restriction of the allowed uses that currently are in that zone. I recognize that a lot of folks want to sort of, and I hate to phrase it this way, but have their cake and eat it too, in the sense that they want these uses removed, but they also don't want any added in. But we think that there may be some uses that are of moderate intensity that may not have an impact on the abutters that would be a nice sort of dip of the toe into the water to see whether this zone can be a little more effective than it has been in the past. And I would, use the fact that we haven't had a contractor's yard come into this planning board a single time as evidence of just that. So I will get off my soapbox, but I do think this is a good zoning amendment. And like the wayfinding signs, I think that we'll have some trialing of this to see if it's actually successful, and it may need to be amended in the future if it's not.
Right, well, and we have, as you said, we talked about it last year.
Yep.
Came out again.
I would suggest
Any other, yep.
I would suggest that the term industry.
I just want to comment on what Matt said and our friend from Taylor Community. So we're getting at a tipping point where building can't continue at the rate it is. Under your regime, building has been huge. And in the 70s, it was huge, right? Were those the two big times? So we're accommodating a lot to this building trade that you say is so big and whatever.
Yeah.
What's bigger? Senior housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're not thinking about senior housing that brings a very attractive use, brings vitality to retail and medical operations, I mean, that's economic development right there.
Mm-hmm.
Contractors' yards are not economic development, they're just accommodations. And there are plenty of places for people to put contractor yards that aren't next to a house, a residential house. And I heard some of those people who live there, and I feel sorry for them with the beeping backup trucks and whatever. How would you like that, Dawn? I mean, I think, I think the contractor point is a great place to compromise.
Okay, and we are going to be addressing senior housing. That's on our work program.
Because that is a housing issue.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I feel...
We agree with you.
Yeah, we do agree with that. I think CCRCs are one concept that we've talked about actively as a board. It's in the master plan. I think we should consider an overlay. I totally agree with you to some extent.
People are moving out of their big houses, and they're going to be moving to Taylor Community.
Absolutely.
Look at the demographics.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us will be there together and have a fine old time.
Can hardly.
Mike's looking at me. He's not going.
I'm just thinking to myself that the guys who work in the contractors' yards are the guys who mow my lawn, who do the snow removal for
You
houses
shouldn't have a
around.
lawn. It's bad for the lake.
My dear, the lawn I have is whatever grows naturally. I don't grass seed it, okay? But whatever it is, he takes care of it, and the guy who does my snow removal and the guy who does everybody else's snow removal, they have a contractor's yard light. It's how they make their living. They got to have some place to store their stuff. And I don't see why
Where have they been storing it all these years? Why are they suddenly going to...
In their garages sometimes, in their back rooms sometimes, in the driveways sometimes.
My name is
As best they can.
Sandra Snyder, and I live right next to Woonsocket Lumber. And I think my main concern would be, if any of these businesses go in, is to put up a barrier so that the resident living there doesn't have to look over into a yard. I built a garage so that would block some of it. I think that's my main concern. And is it ever in the specific conditions required?
It is. That's actually the focus of those specific conditions, and that is the 25-foot buffer and the 75-foot buffer. That's something we haven't had before, and something that's being proposed as part of this proposed zoning change.
Now,
we are requiring, it's from the street and the side as well.
Okay, but that would require so that if something came on the other side of me, I wouldn't have to look directly at it? I mean,
They would be, based on what the use is, they would be required to have some sort of vegetative buffer between what they are choosing to do and your property. That would be required under the specific zoning criteria that we put together here.
Okay, but you're on the right-hand side, right?
no, I'm right next to Woonsocket Lumber.
Oh, so
94 Pine Hill Road,
okay,
yeah.
Okay. all right.
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Yes.
the answer is yes then a vegetative buffer would be required in that situation. And it wasn't.
Anything new coming in.
Yeah,
of course.
exactly, yep. Or any substantial change to an existing site too. We haven't had many over the years in that Pine Hill Road Development District, but if Winnipesaukee Lumber, for example, were to build a massive new building, they'd have to conform to the standards that are in here. Now, they're a bit different because they're a lumber yard, but we still, beyond what we're proposing today, we still have landscaping and vegetative buffering requirements that go above and beyond even what's in here for all of the other uses within our zoning ordinance. So that didn't exist before, does exist now. So I hope that answers your question.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, Kirk Beswick from Taylor again. I want to address the contract yard. I had a couple other thoughts. I know what you're saying, Michael, because we've hired 3 or 4 of those contractors to work on our property up here and, develop a relationship with them. And they've said, it'd be nice to have a place where we have a place to store our stuff. They're currently working out of their garages, out of their backyards, and renting properties and that type of thing. We also have one right behind us, Key Day property run by Seamus, who for a short time was actually using it and wants to use it in that way, and that's why they were pushing that warrant article in a lot of very strongly last year, so they could actually turn that into commercial property and use it as a contract yard. I've also, in my 30 years, been required to do vegetative buffers, and I know they don't really work. For instance, if I had that contract yard in my backyard, having a 25-foot with, some shrubbery between us isn't going to shield me from the noise, the blowing debris, all the sounds and the beeping and, the people coming and going, the dust and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's really, while we have identified that as a need, which we all can agree that these guys need a place to go, we're not disagreeing with that. What we're saying is having it next to a house or a transitional location may not be in everyone's best interest. When I think of the boat place that's out on Filter Bed, and there's nothing really near it, at least on our side of that, surrounded by woods, a swamp, and more woods. Having a contractor yard there really doesn't pose any risk to anybody. But if you put it in Key Day's property, which it would have been allowed under that warrant article that was shot down last year, it would have been right behind my cottages, and it would have been very detrimental to our property. So while conceptually, contractor yards seem to be necessary, I disagree with them in this particular usage, and I think we got to find a better place to put them, or find essentially that's it, find a different place to put them, because if you put them in a mixed or transitional area where there's residential, medical, and that type of thing, they just don't fit with that type of usage. That's kind of where we're coming from.
Thank you. Okay, well, we really do need to move on, and you have spoken.
Contractor's yard, we have a zone that allows it. We also just granted, I believe a year or 2 ago, a contractor's operation on Filter Bed Road.
No, we
Okay, we're
granted an
not-
office and a
not,
storage use on Filter Bed
And
Road.
storage,
We're not
and storage for his
changing the
equipment. So don't say that it
contractor's
isn't
yard. I don't
That was a
allowed.
vehicle storage
Who else to
approval.
say that?
It's storage. Contractor's storage, that's the kind of business he runs, he's a builder.
Okay, well, the contractor's yard.
And we
Key
don't
Day
prohibit, an individual businessman who does the lawn mowing, who brings in a fertilizer or what have you, from storing his equipment in his garage or at the side of his garage or behind his garage. The town doesn't enforce that as any sort of thing that they can't do. They do it all over town. So some of the questions that you get, you might want to just send them out onto Route 28.
The reason they do that is because they cannot find property that's zoned for that
But
use.
nobody's saying that.
We do get inquiries
Okay,
from those people.
What is your proposal
All right,
to us?
so it's being done. People find a way to do it, to bring their equipment into their property and still run a business. We don't need to put it on Pine Hill Road. I hear these people's problems, and I'm concerned for them. But one thing we're really overlooking, beyond Contractors' Yard, is the light industry that you've made a definition for, which is allowed under special exception in this zone within this Pine Hill Development Zoning District.
We're not overlooking it, we just haven't gotten to it yet.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We're not overlooking it, we just haven't gotten to it yet.
Now, now that we've got this definition and see what it isn't something that's desirable. I gave you reasons why it's not really proper for Wolfeboro, and I gave you reasons why it probably won't happen, so I guess I needn't get in a twit about it. But I think it's a real mistake, and what I'm asking is that you do not put light industrial forward within the Pine Hill zoning district. I can't say it any plainer than that. The residents that live there say they don't want the Contractors' Yard. I think you need to hear them. And I think when we get to the industrial, I would think they would feel the same way. Everything else that you've made changes on are pretty great.
Okay, there is no change to the Contractors' Yard. That's still in there as a special exception use. And there is, if we don't do light industry, then industry will stay. So we thought we were trying to address some of these issues that people were speaking to.
I'm
just telling you how we came to these conclusions, okay? So.
I'm just requesting that you don't go forward with it.
Okay, anyone else on Pine Hill? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. And what is the board's pleasure? Did you want to make some changes, or do you want to make a motion to recommend the amendment as presented and move to the town warrant?
I'd be happy to make a motion to move the amendment as proposed to the town's warrant.
Okay,
I'll make that a motion.
okay.
We can discuss it.
Okay, somebody want to?
Seconded.
And motion has been made and seconded. Discussion?
Yeah, I think my justifications are these. The changes that we've made to the permitted uses have made this district a more wholesome one. Providing contractor's yard light, not contractor's yard, there's a considerable difference between the two, but providing an opportunity for guys who have grown their business out of their driveways and their garages and now have maybe a couple of other guys working for them doing the same thing. I can think of any number of firms around here that have done that over the 30-odd years I've lived in this place, giving them a place where they can set up a shop, store their lawnmowers and their snow blowers and whatever they have, and drag them out in the morning and bring them back at the end of the day is a salutary change. It gives them a place where they can actually hang their hats. But changing a special exception use from industry, which could be anything smokestack related, to light industry, which is manufacturing from prefabricated stuff, is a salutary change also. So those are the reasons why I think this is a good amendment.
Further, our job is to balance all of the needs in the community.
I'll also suggest that some of the specifications that are included here are specifically talking to covering material which could get into the groundwater. In other words, you have to cover your salt. You have to cover your things so that they are going to be protected from going places. And to me, it's making a definition which is going to help our environment as compared to letting it go somewhere else. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but
No, you're right. Correct.
And so these are being spelled out and therefore are going to help protect our watershed, which is very much a part of what we need to protect.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, the next item is the definition of habitable space. This was brought to our attention by the code officer, who was having issues with compliance, I guess is the best way to put it.
Concerns about long-term compliance with bathrooms being put on second stories of accessory structures, and those accessory structures then being converted into habitable space long-term. So the recommended amendment is to still allow what I am calling as a shop bathroom, and that would be a toilet room without a full shower or bath on the first floor only of an accessory structure within the ordinance. And the way that we do that is actually by an amendment to the habitable space definition. This has not changed in any way since the first hearing on this matter. No modifications have been made by legal counsel. They were comfortable with all aspects of it.
Okay, thank you. I'll open the public hearing on this item. Okay, and I'll close the public hearing.
Move to warrant.
Planning board members, motion has been made to recommend the amendment as presented and move to the town warrant for consideration. Is that your motion?
Yes, I appreciate it.
Yeah, okay. Somebody want to second the motion? Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. The next item, building codes. This is to amend the current building codes, basically to bring them into conformance with the state codes.
That's simple. There was one amendment by council that you'll see in the amended language document just to change one of my references to statute, but no other change to this. And hopefully this will suit us better over the long term so we don't have to amend it constantly.
Okay, so open the public hearing on this item. And I'll close the public hearing. Planning board members?
Happy to move this change, building
Okay.
codes amendment to...
Recommend the amendment as presented and move to the town warrant. Okay. Motion's been made. Somebody want to second? And seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. Next one, terms defined. This is another definition. This is the light industry definition. The definition or the use for industry already exists, and we felt that was detrimental to the town, and then did some research and came up with a definition for light industry. Matt, do you want to say anything?
Sure. We did analyze several different definitions of this, trying to deal with the fact that we don't have a definition of industry currently in the ordinance. Yeah, it's a permitted use. So, obviously today this does relate to the change made in the Pine Hill Road Development District, but it could relate to something else in the future. And really the intent of this definition is, I think Mike summarized it well, is to allow for certain assembly, repair, fabrication, production, processing of materials that are already sort of formed off-site and then brought into a closed facility that doesn't impact the abutting properties via smoke, noise, dust, or other public nuisance. So really this is a contained facility, much in the same way that PSI molded plastics exists today, although they do have some raw material there, but really a contained facility is what this definition would refer to.
At the last public hearing, somebody mentioned that maybe we should add as issues traffic, but you countered that and said that that's really something that's looked at by the special exception.
It is, and it's something the planning board would look at too. So I think it's pretty well covered in the review process. So I didn't feel the need to add it in where some of these other things wouldn't be covered by the board necessarily. So I think it's important to have them in there.
Okay, so I'll open the public hearing on this item.
This is Suzanne Ryan. This is where I saw that word predominantly. The packaging of products predominantly from previously prepared. Is there not a word that could be better used that would describe? That's very subjective.
If the board chose to, they could just simply remove predominantly, and then it would be packaging of products from previously prepared or refined materials. So it would be pretty hard and fast rule, but the reason it was written that way is because I thought there might be some situations where the materials might not be wholly refined in advance. I don't have a good example of what that would be, but I just wasn't sure that it would be good to be overly prescriptive because we just don't know what types of uses would be presented here.
Because that's a kind of a wiggle word.
This is what, Mike?
Because it's kind of a wiggle word.
Yeah.
You know, it gives us flexibility. When somebody comes here and says, I want to do industry light, what are you going to do? I'm going to make stuff. 30% of what I'm going to do is going to be making stuff with soldering irons, for example. And the other 70% is taking things from one package, sticking them together with things from another package and calling it a new widget. So we would then have the wiggle room to be able to decide, do we really want to let this guy who's going to do 30% kind of light manufacturing on premises get his permit for a light industry operation or not? It gives us some flexibility.
Okay. Let me ask.
My justification.
Thank you. That helps. This use, light industry, will be allowed in the Pine Hill District.
Yep.
How many places within the Pine Hill District can support this type of light industry? Have you actually looked at the map to see what sites could hold this?
It's a question that's impossible to answer in the sense that
But
a
the
very
business park does have.
Yeah, but definitely. But
What? I didn't
a
hear.
very small. The business park is certainly built to accommodate this type of use, but this doesn't really have a defined scope. I mean, this could be a very small fabrication office for an artisan where they want to do something that fits within this definition. So it could be a very small space. So I would say that any lot within that district could potentially accommodate it, provided that it has the parking and the other things that the planning board would require through the site plan review process.
So I can sleep a little easier tonight because predominantly it isn't going to happen up there in any scale that would disrupt, it seems like, given the way you described it.
Yeah, I mean, the district is pretty finite, right? It only has about 25 parcels in it.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
you know, we're not hearing a lot of questions about subdivision of those parcels. So
Right now, one of the uses permitted by special exception is industry.
Yeah.
I follow, thank you. I do follow that. I
so-
recognize and I appreciate
We're changing it to light
redefinition.
industry,
I appreciate that.
and that could be some guy assembling radios. if people still use
I
radios.
appreciate the board heard at the last session last year the concerns and they modified it. I appreciate that. Let me just ask one more question, and I'm sorry that it's late, but it's only once a year we get to do this. Is this for the entire town?
yes, in the sense that this definition is going in the definition section that applies everywhere.
That has the type of zone for what? It won't go in agricultural, it won't go in residential.
Nope, it's only, the only places where this is permitted, if the zoning changes pass, would be the Pine Hill Road Development District.
Is it what?
If the zoning changes pass on the Pine Hill Road Development District, the only place this would be impacted is that.
Okay,
So industry is not allowed in any other zone in the community.
okay. All right.
So we've made it
Thank you.
industry light as opposed, we've made it industry light as opposed to industry. And we've removed assembly operations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna close the public hearing.
I'd just like to make a punctuation comment again. Industry,
Oh.
comma, light is just not right. It shouldn't be industry, comma.
The only reason I kept that structure is because that's how the existing zoning ordinance treats every definition. I agree, it's not, I can change it.
Can't we just say light industry?
Yeah, I can change
Defining
that.
light industry. Or light industry.
Yeah, we can. Just make it light industry, not industry, comma, light.
Right.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
I don't think that requires a motion.
I like it.
Wonderful idea.
Okay, I
don't you
close the
make it
public
and second it?
hearing, and I'll entertain a motion to recommend the amendment as presented and move to the town warrant for consideration with the comma removed and light put in front.
Of industry.
Industry.
In front of it.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, moving right along. The Cotton Mountain Historic Agricultural District. This started out as a very simple, gee whiz, shouldn't we do this type thing? There were no standards listed in the zoning ordinance, and that seemed to be something that was important.
Yeah, I think the intent was that, and then I know the petitioner's here, but it was intended more as an overlay district, but the way that, just because of the way that several sections were worded, it was actually its own standalone district with no permitted uses or dimensional standards. So all that I've recommended is taking the underlying zoning dimensional standards and applying them to the Cotton Mountain Historic District. The only other change that I've made is that I did work with council on just clarifying the language within the description of where the zone is. So the new language is, it's a requirement of a minimum lot size for 10 acres for all contiguous land of parcels within 250 feet of the following roads. And the road names aren't changing in any way, stays exactly as is, but council felt that that was appropriate language to basically say that if your parcel is within 250 feet of one of those roads, the entirety of the parcel is subject to a 10-acre minimum lot size. Whether the entire parcel is within 250 feet or not, any portion is within that 250, it's a 10-acre minimum lot size. And I believe that was the intent of the original petition. That's the only change that I've made above and beyond.
So, you want to open the public hearing?
See a thoughtful Mike Hodder, too. And
How did they come up with 250 feet? What was it, 150, 350? Why 250?
250 is what was in the ordinance as it stood today.
What ordinance?
The Cotton Mountain Historic District ordinance. That 250 was already...
Not for...
Oh, yes, no,
not for
I'm sorry.
The 10 acres.
Yes, that was something that I came up with based on the old historic district standard. I thought 250 would be an appropriate
I think the
dimensional
setback
measurement.
for historic is 350. Is it?
No, I don't think so. So that's actually, I'm glad you asked that question because that was a change that I made. I just aligned it with the historic district. I hate to say that's my methodology, but it really was.
I guess I'm trying to get a grip on what's the difference.
And no, just one clarifying comment. No, the existing district does say 250 feet. Yeah, it does. It does say 250 feet.
The existing for the 10 acres?
That's how I read the existing ordinance.
That's news to me, but that's okay. I just wondered how it got in there.
Yeah, that is where I got it. It's in the existing ordinance.
I think that when we wrote the, and again, I haven't had time to look up the ordinance, but I think we just said from the road, from these roads.
Okay.
It didn't matter how many feet. If you were 1 feet or 300 feet, your land was still within that road. But
All right.
I'll live with it for now.
Okay.
The other question I have is, on this ordinance is, where'd it go? Oh, page 2. Permitted uses. Special exception. Isn't public utility lines a given? I mean, doesn't the town have the authority?
So the answer is yes. This was something that was flagged by council that I said, don't touch right now. It's something that, you're right, it doesn't even need to be listed here, but council recommended a wholesale change everywhere in the ordinance, and I said that is not necessary right now. We understand that legally, public utility lines are exempt from certain provisions here anyway, so although it says that here, I didn't want to make this change everywhere in the ordinance, so I just included it as it was in the residential agricultural district, Suzanne. It's again kind of a poor answer, but that is why it's in there.
Radio and television transmission facilities
It's antiquated language.
in the historic district?
We're not adding it, it's there.
Well, you're adding it to this Cotton Mountain zone. This
There
is
are
a
currently
zoning
no
change.
It definitely is. It definitely is, but there are currently no standards, so
Well, there's nothing says legally you have to adopt those exact standards from the agricultural district.
that's definitely true. You're right on that. You're right on
So
that.
I'd like to see C removed.
Which one? Just the public utility?
On 175, 126?
If you do that,
The
I'm just,
public utility, is that the one you want removed?
Yeah, I'd like to see that removed.
the only thing I'd say is if you do that, I think you have to have another public hearing.
Yeah.
And that's not, that's not saying do it or don't. I just think you do have to have another public hearing. So you
What did footnote 1 refer to?
that it requires a site plan review by the planning board, I believe. Check on that right now, Mike.
Suzanne, like you said, like you said earlier, when we were talking about the telecommunications ordinance, regarding 5G, it's not going to happen anytime soon. If you look at number C in what you're concerned about right now, that ain't going to happen anytime soon. I don't think it's necessary to amend this and go through another public hearing because what you're concerned about is not really anything to be concerned about.
Well, substations could.
Whatever they mean.
What?
What does a substation mean?
You see those little things around those little metal boxes?
Yeah,
That's a substation.
yeah.
You know that.
Is that an issue?
Yeah. There isn't a need for it there, and it's a historic district, and we don't need
It was
it.
not a historic district. It's not in that sense of the word. It's a Cotton Mountain Historic Agricultural District, not a historic district.
Historic agricultural, it's both. But anyway, I'd like to see C removed, and I don't understand why cemeteries for human beings has to be by special exception. There's cemeteries all over that area, and I would hate to see everybody have to come in to get a special exception for a family cemetery. It's allowed by state law to be buried on my ground,
Right.
and I don't think I have to get
Right.
after I'm dead and buried, come in for a special
I agree.
exception.
This is intended as a public cemetery. This is intended as more than just
Well,
maybe.
it doesn't say that.
Right, but I know it does not say that, but our zoning doesn't
If
say.
we're going to outlaw the kind of
concept.
cemeteries you're talking about, it would say private cemeteries for human beings, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, then
And
it
it
does,
should-
but it doesn't, so
But
it's,
it shouldn't be by special exception.
these are public cemeteries for more than one family member, or more than one family, I mean.
It's a private cemetery which you're allowed to have on your land in the state of New Hampshire. So I don't see why, if the state of New Hampshire allows it without a special exception, why the town of Wolfeboro wants to have to allow it by special exception. So anyway, I can only ask to have C and D removed. And I'm still not sure about the 250, but I'll let that slide for now.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Okay,
I guess I would end up saying that a cemetery needs to be away from certain things such as water courses. So it needs to go through some approval process.
I think the state addresses that.
Yeah, 30 feet.
Can we add public without, is that a
Could this not
substantial
fall under a
change?
minor textual change by deleting those two?
No, that would be a substantive change.
I worry that that is a substantive change. Again, it's not a big deal to have another public hearing. If you really want to change this stuff, if it's only for this one zoning change, it's not a huge issue.
Right.
It's just going to be an agenda
I
item
won't
on the
even
next.
come. How is that?
No,
And there would be
that's not what
absolutely no
we're
point, would there?
suggesting.
If you offer the change and we make the change and you don't even
just
come
trying
to
to make
speak
it
to it.
easy
Yeah,
on
you better be there, Suzanne, if the change
No,
is made.
I would strongly urge you, Suzanne, to tell this board to go ahead and move the warrant as written to the 2020 warrant. And so we can all go home sometime tonight.
Well,
Not have another hearing on the 21st.
And have a hearing?
No, I don't think we need one. Cemeteries, in my opinion, when he says cemeteries for human beings, that's a public cemetery, because it doesn't say private. Private is not prohibited.
I don't see that.
And public utility lines,
I don't read that
radio and
into it.
television transmission facilities, they're never going to happen there. Just like you're never going to get its 5G up there.
Okay, well, those are your issues, right? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. And Suzanne is suggesting removing C and D from 175-126.5. How does the board feel about that? Now, that would require another public hearing, except last year we withdrew the whole Pine Hill district without.
If you want to just remove it, you can do that. But if we're going to clarify, I think we need to have another public hearing. You are allowed to remove without a public hearing.
We could.
Why would we want to do that?
I'm not saying you would. I just
Indicating what it was, the suggestion was, and trying to determine what the procedure.
Well, why don't, here's my suggestion.
Okay.
Let's remove C and D to, we have a member of the public here who has sat through hours worth of deliberations tonight and
She also was responsible for getting this into the zoning.
and she's responsible for getting it into the zoning and has contributed during the evening with some interesting information and useful commentary. Take it out, have a new public hearing.
hold another.
Yeah. On that, we have to, you can't take C and D out without holding another public hearing.
No, you can.
Or take C and D out, hold a new public hearing.
No,
You can take them out without a new public hearing.
We can?
Yes. Yes, you can. You can withdraw whole articles without another public hearing.
We can withdraw parts of articles?
Well,
Yes, I believe so. But I've said, if you feel uncomfortable with that, just continue the public hearing, I'll renotice it. It's not a big deal.
Continue it.
okay, how do the rest of you feel? You're probably not
Leave it
feeling
in
much
there and
right
just
about
move it to
now.
warrant.
I'd rather move it to warrant.
What was it?
Move it to warrant down here.
Oh, okay. With no changes?
With no changes.
No changes.
Okay, so that's the motion. Is somebody second?
And I had made a motion to hold the public hearing open on this article, this warrant amendment, and make the changes to remove C and D. Do I hear a second to that?
No, I don't think there was a second.
Well, I'm asking for one.
Okay. Somebody want to second that motion?
Okay, the motion dies. Thank you.
No, I'll second the motion.
All right, second motion. We've heard the arguments. I'm not going to make any more for them.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to keep this item open, remove the two sections we've just been talking about.
Continue it to January 21st
And
at
continue the
7 p.m.
public hearing until, which means another legal notice?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Aye.
Well, just a minute. Okay, so that's the motion. Okay, now.
Get down.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye, me.
No.
Okay, we're going to have to do better than this, folks.
John
Okay,
Vaughn.
we're going to try this again. All right. Those in favor of Mike's motion, please raise their hand. Okay. Two. Okay. Those against the motion, please raise your hands. Okay. All right. Okay, so the motion failed. All right, is there another motion?
Buying you any more coffee?
Okay, Peter, it's your turn.
Make a motion, we
No. Sorry.
make a motion, we move the proposed language to the warrant
Recommend.
and recommend.
Recommend.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Thanks for hanging in there.
Nobody better propose a cemetery.
Julie, you can make some
Okay, now we do.
I'm going to need one shortly.
Okay, there's anyone here for public comment?
Public comment?
I may,
No, the next item on the agenda was public comment, and so I was just going through the agenda. Kind of an anal person. Okay, the next item is a partial release of the financial security for the Pine Hill storage.
Yes, I'll be very brief. We did have a site inspection of Pine Hill Storage. We have a recommendation in front of us for our engineer for a release of security of $47,236.48 based on the completed improvements, recognizing that some loam and seed does need to be done, and 25% of the value of shrubs and trees needs to be held by the planning board. I did include a copy of the adopted site plan for your review. There are a few minor issues that we have to deal with that weren't held in security, including striping of parking spaces just because of the timing of the season. And we will address those issues with the applicant at a later time, but I do endorse the recommended release of security of $47,236.48.
When do you expect the bollards to be filled with concrete?
Bollards have been filled with concrete actually 3 days ago. That's already been
the only
done.
concern I
Yes.
have.
Yep, that has been done. I got pictures from the applicant. That's all set.
I'd be happy to move to release the bond, the security bond.
Okay, and I'll second the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, and just one other item. This 5-minute rule, could you put that on the work session agenda?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah.
Because, okay, let me just tell you why I'm sensitive about this issue. In my previous life, we had an issue with the Planning and Zoning Commission where they told somebody to sit down and stop talking, and it went all the way to the Connecticut Supreme Court, and I went along with it.
Was there an established rule?
And that was the issue. And so that's why I want to have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if we do it, I need to mention it at every meeting and do it properly. I don't have any problem.
We did talk about this when I first got here.
Yes, we
3
did.
years ago, I remember.
Right, but it's
And I was the one who was the proponent of it. I mean, I just can't tolerate it.
Yeah.
I think that we're trying to fix a problem that we don't have. We have, how many people, and count them on the fingers of one hand, get up there and spiel on forever and drive us all mad?
It only takes one.
Doesn't matter.
But the
Doesn't matter.
selectmen have had it, and they just put it on their agenda.
Yeah, and the selectman has 3 minutes at the end of a meeting and a total of 15 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
And that's restraint of free speech, in my opinion.
Okay, well,
And
that's,
I'm
now you
against
see why
any-
it went to the Connecticut.
I'm against
Supreme
any kind of limitation on public input here.
So why?
If we have to deal with one person who spiels on forever and ever and ever, we get Mr. Berwick from Taylor Home last meeting, who spoke for more than 5 minutes. We would have held him to that rule, and he would not have been able to finish.
He would have figured it out. Maybe 5 is too short, but I think 10 would be reasonable.
I don't think we should have, we're a public body, we're supposed to be hearing the public input. If someone comes in who is clearly not insane, ranting and raving about maniac stuff, and speaking to the issue at hand, that person should be able to speak. He is a citizen, pays taxes, lives here. We just got to deal. That's how I feel.
Other people are prohibited from participating. I mean, there were a number of people who left. I think we should say, okay, you can get up again. You can get up again. But make your point in 5 minutes, and if you're not done, sit down, let everybody else have a turn, and then get up again.
Yeah, hold the person's feet to the fire, keep them on target.
That's right, and that's the real issue, because much of what she ends up saying is unrelated to what the particular issue we're supposed to be talking about is.
Well, a lot of times spent looking through her papers and,
Yeah, trying to figure out what next to say. I understand.
Prohibit anybody from sending us their dissertation. They can give it to us for reading.
Yes.
It would be helpful if we had what she...
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, and then they can use 5
that-
minutes to recap.
As long as we do it diplomatically.
Well, that's why I think it needs to be on an agenda so we can discuss it. No, probably no, isn't it?
I don't know if I'm like stressed out or what.
Eyes are almost coming out.
Thank you so much. No, I just saw it. I'm like, that looks good.
Oh, could we just, are the minutes okay? Sorry, folks. Whatever, let's see, the December 17th minutes. Any issues? I didn't find anything.
Yeah, I think I had one. I'm not going to bore the board with more than that. I don't think I had any. But bear with me, since we're doing this now, we may as well go with. All right, page 2. Second from the bottom where Mike Cotter's feeling. Expected in a 2-day charrette is extending board members. This insert is overextending.
Overextending.
Yeah, it's not even an important change, but it jumped out at me
Overextending.
when I read it.
On page 5, I asked if the historic district is 300 feet, and you confirmed it was 350, and we just said it was.
I'm not laughing, but it is 250 feet, so that should be clarified in that,
Yeah, we have to
that's,
fix
it's
that.
250 feet. It's in the use district definition section. I just looked at it.
Okay, so the minute
to
should
change
say,
that.
Sorry that
I confirmed it as
it's
250.
250 feet.
okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, folks, thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That was long and tedious.
If anyone would like a copy of Suzanne's materials, those are available over here for your review, if you'd like.
Don't everybody rush up.
If anybody doesn't want them, I'll take them home and burn them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just take them.
I don't
Motion to adjourn. For all of us.
Yeah, wait, hang on, say something.